Before we start the meeting, I have a few housekeeping announcements. First of all, there's no planned fire alarm today, so if you do hear the fire alarm, we will need to evacuate the building, I'm afraid. There will be fire marshals on site to help direct you, but basically the likelihood is you would need to leave the building by the way you came in, and then the muster point is about 100 yards down that way at St John's Churchyard. If you need to use the toilet, if you go out these doors, there's a corridor opposite. If you go down that corridor and then turn left, you'll find both the ladies and the gents down that corridor. And if you need refreshments, there are some drinks and food machines out in the reception area where you started. Please, if you have a phone, could you make sure it's set to silent or turn it off if you can bear to do that. This meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel, so if at any point you're addressing the committee, please do not disclose anything in this meeting that you would not want to be in the public domain. Members of the public are welcome to film, audio record, photograph or tweet the public proceedings of the meeting, but if you do choose to do so, please take care not to take any footage of other members of the audience. Please keep any cameras pointing towards this end of the room. Councillors and officers, we're quite happy to be photographed if people want to do that, but we don't have permission for other members of the audience, so please don't do that. During the meeting, members of the committee won't access the internet other than to look at the papers of this meeting, or send or receive emails, text messages or tweets concerning the business of the committee, and that's so that it's very clear to the public all the information on which we are basing our decisions. I'd like to remind speakers to use the microphone when speaking, so if at any point you need to speak, microphones are now relatively easy to work. There's a big button at the front, press that and it should turn red like this if you're able to speak. But you probably might need to speak quite close to the microphone because unlike our old ones, you do need to speak a little bit closer for these to be captured. Please don't put any mobile devices near the microphones because it can tend to... That brings us to the first item on the agenda. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies from councillors Dalton, Harper and Soanes, and I also have apologies for lateness from councillor Bamby, although he does assure me he should be here in a few minutes. That brings us to confirmation of voting members. So I'm going to ask voting members first of all to raise their hands and then introduce themselves. So that's the five of us, and as I said, we'll ask Councillor Bamby to indicate as well when he appears. So just so you know who we are, I'm Councillor Richard Livingstone. I'm chair of this committee, and I'm also a councillor in Old Kent Road Ward. And we'll go that way, start again.
Councillor Gavin Edwards, and I'm heading.
Councillor Kath Whittam, vice chair of the Councillor
Councillor Emily Tester, Councillor North Bermondsey Ward.
Councillor Martin Seaton, reserve member and North Ward.
Thank you. And I'm now going to ask the council officers to introduce themselves. We've got quite a few in the room. I'll start with Colin.
Hi, Colin Wilson, Assistant Director for Strategic Development.
Kamil Dolebski, Legal Advisor.
Greg Weaver, the Constitutional Clerk.
Tim Kurtz, Head of Regeneration for Old Kent Road.
Neil Lopesha, Section 106 and Seoul.
Alex Fish, Senior Planner in the Planning Policy Team.
Charlotte Brooks-Laurie, Head of Planning Policy.
Emily Tadgell, Senior Transport Planner.
Chirag Barbin, Senior Planner in Strategic Applications.
Vish Patel, Head of Strategic Applications.
Richard Craig from the Design Team.
And I think we've got a couple of others that are in the back rows.
Nanette Saki, Senior Development Manager, Summit.
Thank you.
Tan Chong, Team Leader, Old Kent Road Team.
Thank you. Thank you for, I think that's everybody I've caught. So thank you. Notification. Next item is notification of any item of business the chair deems urgent. We've had an addendum report, and we've also had a copy of the presentation distributed us that we'll be looking through this evening. Does any member wish to declare any interest or dispensations in respect of any item or issue to be considered at tonight's meeting? Thank you. That moves us on to the minutes of the last meeting, which is set out in pages 1 to 6 of the main agenda pack. So that's a meeting that happened on the 15th of July. Are members that were here happy to approve those? Thank you. That brings us to item 6, the adoption of the Climate and Environment Supplemental Planning Document. Charles, you're presenting on this.
Thank you. Thank you. So the Climate and Environment SPD is the fourth supplementary document which I am presenting this comment to be in line, and the SPD those consultation which ended in November 2020. Consultation was carried out in accordance statement of community involvement, and it involved over 30,000 hours and public events which were held. Feedback was also sought from environment scrutiny and other. So the breadth of the SPD reflects that on environmental and the SPD cannot introduce new additional guidance. We have in the SPD very clearly indicated where we feel the guidance is supportive of existing policy practice, where we encourage applicants to exceed that existing. The SPD will be and so just to clarify, future is which are identified will be picked through the local SPD. So the content of the SPD provides thematic guidance range through to waste management. There's also important guidance on net relevant to the subtext. Guidance is also provided on areas of relevance which frequently come up through the application. That includes types of cycle store, so public ground use, relevance to climate and landscaping. As I've said previously, it sets out the minimum policy and the best practices across. So following the consultation, we received 50 responses. We have made a few amendments to the SPD, and these changes are essentially around clarification on work, protection criteria, retrofit and circular. Additional guidance has been provided on air quality, biodiversity risk, and a new section has been added on space. This is in line with the GLA. This isn't obviously a current policy requirement, but it's in there in case application is something that is beginning to get talked about a lot more. Additional reference has been made to issues such as trading public of the SPD also cross-reference the SPD so that applicants have a really good reference to the order range of matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from members of committee? I've made some comments about flood resilience outside of this meeting, but I'm not going to go through those issues again today, and I've had some helpful. If there are no further questions on this, are we happy to move the reports and go forward? Agreed. Can we just formally, if I take that by members, Councillor Whittam.
Agreed.
Councillor Edwards.
Agreed.
Councillor Seaton.
Agreed.
Councillor Tester.
Agreed.
And Councillor Richard Livingstone's also agreed, so that's approved. Thank you. That brings us to the first of a number of items on Section 106 agreements. Now, I have very quickly before this meeting discussed this with members, and because we've got quite a tight agenda, what I'm going to suggest is rather than hear the presentation from the officer on this, if there are any questions on any of those items, that we will take those now. If anybody has any. In that case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn through them each in turn and we will vote on those items. So first of all, item 7, which is release of £101,782.80 from Section 106 planning agreements for delivery of playground on Bells Gardens estate. Councillor Whittam.
Agreed.
Councillor Seaton.
Agreed.
Councillor Edwards.
Agreed.
Councillor Tester.
Agreed.
And Councillor Richard Livingstone, I'm also agreeing that, and so that motion is carried. So moving on to item 8, which is release of £139,927.45 from Section 106 agreements for delivery of the Great Suffolk Street area schemes, as set out on pages 17 to 34 of the main agenda pack. So I'd like to move that we adopt the officer's recommendations. Does any member wish to second this? Should have asked that previously, so apologies for that. Councillor Whittam, how do you wish to vote on this?
Agreed.
Councillor Edwards.
Agreed.
Councillor Seaton.
Agreed.
Councillor Tester.
Agreed.
Councillor Richard Livingstone also voting in favour of that, so that is approved. That brings us to item 9, the release of £428,834.84 of Section 106. Sorry. 94 pence, sorry. Yes. Sorry. I'll repeat that. £428,834.94. I've been happy to have pulled that 10p out of my pocket if we were short of it. Of Section 106 funds to support the delivery of the Lost Peck Flood Alleviation Environmental Enhancement Scheme. And that's set out in pages 35 to 55 of the main agenda report. Is that seconded? I saw Councillor Edwards, and it's his neck of the woods. I'll take that as seconding it. Councillor Whittam, how do you wish to vote on this?
Agreed.
Councillor Seaton.
Agreed.
Councillor Edwards.
Agreed.
Councillor Tester.
Agreed.
And Councillor Richard Livingstone. I'm also agreeing with that. And finally, the release of £5,078,652.01 from Section 106 agreements to TfL to deliver improvements to bus services on the Old Kent Road and the Elephant and Castle area, to introduce what's called the Baker Loop bus. I've got Tim down to speak on this, but again, I'm going to take this unless there are any questions. Is that seconded by anybody? That's Councillor Whittam. If we could just vote on that. Councillor Whittam.
Agreed.
Councillor Edwards.
Agreed.
Councillor Seaton.
Agreed.
Councillor Tester.
Agreed.
And Councillor Richard Livingstone also voting for that, and so that is approved and the motion is carried. So thank you for that. So Neil, we've given you an easy evening tonight, but you're welcome to stay for the rest of the evening if you wish. You're also welcome to leave if you want to do so. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to the meeting, which is about the items looking at development management. So next item of business, first of all, concerns the determination of planning applications. So I'd like to remind everyone on the committee and in the audience of how we conduct our business. First of all, officers will present their report, outline their recommendations, and answer questions raised by the committee. Then, if present and wishing to speak, the following may then address the committee for no more than 3 minutes each. First of all, spokesperson representing any objectors to the application. By now, you should hope to have identified who's going to speak on your behalf, and if that is more than one person, work out how you're going to allocate those 3 minutes, that 3-minute time slot between you. Then the applicant or their agent. Then a spokesperson representing any supporters of the application that is within 100 metres of the development site. And finally, a ward councillor representing the area affected by the proposal. Those ward members in attendance and those nominated to speak on behalf of the objectors, supporters and applicants should sit as far forward in this room as they can. That's particularly important for applicants because we often find there might be questions that come up that we need further clarification on, so we might need you to come back to answer some further questions. However, that's just for the use of communication between the committee and the speaker, in case need to be clarified later. It's not an opportunity to take part in the general debate of the committee. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of the proposal and should avoid repeating any information which is already in the report. And just to remind you that this meeting is not a hearing where participants present evidence which can then be cross-examined by other participants. That's all right. It happens to me at times as well. No problem. So, at the end of each representation, the committee may ask questions of the presenter. Speakers should lead the committee to subjects on which they would welcome further questioning. After receiving all submissions, the committee will debate the application and consider the recommendation. Just to remind you, this is a council committee meeting which is open to the public, but please no interruptions from the audience. And finally, I'd like everyone present to know that although this planning committee comprises of members from different political parties, we're not politically whipped to vote on a certain line by our party. Each of us makes our decisions in accordance with the council's planning policies based on the information contained within the relevant reports, together with the consultation responses and any verbal submission made today. How we approach these applications set out in Development Management Report, item 11. If members are happy to note the report, we will move on to considering the planning application. So I might wait a couple of minutes to see if Councillor Bambi joins us, but we can agree this now if members are happy. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. He's late. He's late for his own lateness. I think we'll give him 5 minutes, as he did let us know he was going to be running slightly late. And the reason for this is we want every member who's voting on an item to hear all the evidence, and so we wait if a member's going to turn up if they're to participate in the item. Otherwise, he's going to have to sit out the whole item. Yeah, so we're going to adjourn very shortly for 5 minutes, and if you want to come back in 5 minutes' time, we'll make a start then. So apologies for slight interruption, but if you can be back in 5 minutes, thank you. Councillor Bamby, first of all, could I ask you to introduce yourself and confirm you're a voting member of this committee?
Good evening, Chair in the room. My name is Councillor Joseph Bamby, Councillor for Chilsall Ward, and I am a voting member.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to turn to officers to present on Picton House.
Thank you. This evening I'll be presenting an application which is seeking planning permission for 80 London Road, Southwark, otherwise known as Skipton House. The scheme includes demolition of the existing building, retention and reuse of the basement level to enable the construction of 2 buildings seeks to deliver 243 residential units, 1,400 purpose-built student accommodation units, 924 square metres of retail, food and beverage space, 1,106 square metres of office and medical services, as well as hard and soft landscaping, pedestrian and vehicle access, cycle parking, wider public realm improvements, and associated highway works. The application site is bounded by London Road to the southeast, Ontario Street to the west, and Newington Causeway to the east. To the rear of the site along the northern boundary is Perry Library of South Bank University and Keyworth Hostel. The site is located adjacent to the Bakerloo Line station, which is located. The application site contains an existing 7-storey steel-framed office building with basement. The main entrance to the building faces London Road, while service vehicle access is located from the rear from Ontario Street between the site and Perry Library. This site does not contain any landscaping or public. The site is also located within a central activity zone, town centre, opportunity area, full building area, and vision area, and has a PTEL rating of 6B, indicating an excellent level of. The London Underground, Northern and Bakerloo lines are both accessible via the adjacent Bakerloo line station, while Eltham and Castle National Rail station is located 250 metres south of the site. The site also benefits from extensive bus networks operating nearby Newington Causeway and Road. And lastly, the CS7 cycle superhighway is located to the west of the site and runs along the street and south in central London. The immediate area can be categorised as predominantly commercial, with shopping and town centre uses around Elephant and Castle Square and Walworth Road. The scale and massing within the area is mixed, with several tall buildings present in the townscape along Newington Causeway, St George's Road and New Kent Road. This includes Eileen House to the north, which is a 41-storey residential complex shown in the top left image, as well as Metro Central Heights, which is a series of 3 residential buildings ranging from 7 to 18 stories, located directly east across Newington. Sorry. In terms of previous planning applications, a resolution to grant full planning permission was obtained in 2016 for the comprehensive development of the entire block, including Perry Library and Keyworth Hostel. The scheme included up to 39 stories comprising residential units, as well as retail, cultural, fitness, and office uses. An illustration of the approved scheme is shown in the image in the left. Sorry, on the left. Planning permission was also granted in 2022 for part retention, part demolition, reconfiguration, and recladding of the existing building, and an extension to create 6 additional stories to accommodate office space. This is the image on the right. The next slide shows a comparison between the 2016 office-led scheme and the proposed development, noting the considerable differences in massing and separation distances. The next slide summarises public consultation undertaken by the applicant and the council. It is noted that a total of 119 representations from members of the public have been received, including 2 supports and 116 objections. These primarily related to architectural design, height, bulk and scale, loss of amenity, disturbance, traffic and parking, lack of public realm, and green space and sustainability. These issues have been covered in detail in the main report and will be touched on later in this presentation. This brings us to the proposed scheme, which involves the construction of 2 buildings stepping up in height from 21 to 31 stories and linked at podium and 2nd and 5th floor levels. Each of the buildings contains part student and part residential use, as shown in the coloured diagram on the screen. 243 affordable residential flats would be delivered to the southern side of each block, while 1,434 purpose-built student rooms would be delivered to the north. A party wall separates the two uses within each block, and each use within the blocks has its own lift and stair call access. The ground floor comprises 944 square metres of retail and food and beverage floor space centred around the new public square, known as Skipton Circus. At first and second floor, over 1,000 square metres of flexible office and medical services are proposed alongside back-of-house facilities. The table at the bottom of the screen also summarises the affordable housing offer. A total of 244 new affordable homes are provided as part of the development. This equates to 40.3% of the total habitable rooms, and the provision of affordable housing is proposed to be split 28.4% social rented homes and 11.6% intermediate by habitable room. Taking a closer look at the ground floors of the proposed buildings, this slide shows the location of various uses across the two buildings, noting the provision of Class E food and beverage and retail uses, fronting Ontario Street, London Road and Newington Causeway, as well as the location of entrance lobbies for each building, student amenity, cycle access, bioscapes and back of house. The next slide shows the first floor of the proposed building, including the location of flexible medical and office uses, areas of student amenity and bike storage. The level 4 plan shows the podium level. This links the residential components of each building at this level and provides area of amenity to the affordable units. The location and layout of the student units and communal facilities and amenity are also shown within the student link at the rear, which is continued up to level 6. In terms of amenity, the podium level has been designed to include a planting buffer and raised planters which permit light into the student rooms while maintaining privacy by blocking views in. That's shown in the diagram in the bottom right corner. The next plan shows the separation distances between the buildings. It's noted that these distances would exceed 20 metres between the student and residential units, which face inward towards the podium, while the separation distances between the two residential blocks would be more than 25 metres, with windows and balconies being offset to minimise direct views between the buildings. The angle design of the buildings themselves also assist in minimising direct sight lines between the buildings and the units. This slide illustrates the proposed development in long section, showing the residential and student buildings, including Class E uses, in the left image, while the right image shows the student building in long section, as well as the student amenity link in the middle. The proposed development would provide larger family homes, achieving a housing mix of 68.3%, homes with 2 or more bedrooms, and 24.8% homes with 3 or more bedrooms. The design of the affordable homes would all meet or exceed the minimum space standards prescribed by the local plan, with all apartments achieving floor-to-ceiling heights of at least 2.5 metres. And 67% of the apartments have been designed to be dual aspect to maximise natural light and ventilation, with no north-facing single aspect flats. All apartments would have access to private balconies greater than 10 square metres in size, as well as communal amenity space on the podium and roof levels. Further shared elements have been incorporated to enhance the amenity of the residents, including dedicated utility areas, dedicated bulky waste storage areas at basement level. The affordable homes would also have access to significant public realm and landscaping works which have been proposed along Ontario Street, Newington Causeway and Skipton Circus, including play space, gardens, seating and breakout and event spaces. Looking at the student component, the student rooms themselves comprise a range of flexible room types, from standard studios to premium studios to suit a variety of different needs, including and these include a range of sizes and configurations and furnishing options, all of which would include integrated storage, study areas, kitchen facilities, and would also include an ensuite shower room. As already touched on, the residents of the student element would have access to a central shared facility between the entrances that connect the student components. And this comprises a large atrium surrounded by a variety of uses, including study, lounge, cafe, and multiple seating areas. leading up to the first and second levels, which contain quiet study spaces, separate private dining, co-working, and outdoor amenity areas. Additional communal amenity are provided through the active link on levels 3, 4, and 5, which includes spaces such as gym, cardio rooms, breakout spaces, as well as outdoor amenity. A total of 3,200 square meters of indoor communal amenity space and 167.9 square meters of outdoor amenity space will be provided for access to students. In terms of the urban design and layout, an important aspect of the development is the pairings of the residential and student towers. The back-to-back arrangement provides an efficient building form, both in terms of construction and optimizing habitable floor space. However, it is noted that this does generate a significant or a notable broad massing above the podium. While the development is distinctly bulky, in its massing for its height, the folded form of the oblique view eases the sense of scale. Currently, the extent of height and bulk would be singular within the townscape, which is generally characterized by moderately tall slab blocks and slender towers. However, the proposed designs are highly articulated in terms of height and detailed architecture, which work together not only to bring visual interest, but also to relieve the bulkiness and avoid an overwhelming sense of scale. The staggered and cascading arrangement of the different tower heights also helps to reduce the visual bulk of the development, as well as suggesting a more contextual response, with a build form seen to step down from Eileen House towards the gyratory. This transition in height brings different perspectives to the development when viewed from surrounding streets, supporting a sense of ensemble of tall buildings rather than a singular build. The character is further enhanced by the modulation of the facades and different elevational treatments of the buildings. Deep recesses are introduced between the front facades of the student and housing blocks, creating deep shadow gaps that emphasize the verticality of the two abutting buildings. The changes in detailed architecture add to the effect. This includes the use of setbacks, balconies, different window grids, the size of openings, and contrasting color tones, which work well to bring out the visual distinction between the two buildings and allow them to read as two discrete, slender building forms. As such, while the proposed building form is tall and bulky, it will not appear notably out of character with the emerging context within the heart of the town centre. The proposals are the outcome of an extensive design-led process that has worked through the detailed heights of the tall buildings in response to strategic and important townscape views, and with an emphasis on achieving a high-quality design. Key elements of this have been the strengthening of architectural language, with a notable focus on achieving a clear expression of the towers. Overall, the architecture is well considered and effective, bringing a strong material quality to the development, as well as a functional quality to the commercial, housing, and student uses. The submission includes base studies demonstrating the depth of design work that is convincing and welcome. Furthermore, the design intent will be carried through to the final details and finishes by way of a condition confirming the detailed design of the buildings. This will include the provision of submission of sample materials and the construction of sample bays for the colonnade and tall building details. In terms of local character and townscape, the development will make a highly positive contribution to the local context, not only in resolving an underwhelming site on an important road junction, but also in providing an appealing architecture that will add to a strong sense of place. In particular, the design of the podium and towers are well crafted and distinctive to the site's specific conditions and constraints. It would frame the adjacent streetscape and create a memorable public space and setting for the underground station entrance, providing greater legibility to the town centre. This is particularly illustrated in the views north from North Kent Road, which are shown in the bottom two images. It is noted that the scheme causes less than substantial harm to the setting of the Grade 2 St. George's Obelisk and Grade 2 Metro Central Heights Metropolitan Tabernacle and terraced housing within West Square. In this instance, there are a number of significant public benefits arising from the scheme, which should be considered against these impacts. In terms of design benefits specifically, these comprise the improved architecture and public space, with a strong identity and sense of place, a much enhanced setting of the locally listed underground station, the improved permeability of the site, the increased activation and animation of its building frontages, and the more coherent streetscape, widening pavements, and refreshed public realm of Ontario Street and Newington Causeway. The proposed development will maintain or exceed minimum distances as set out in the SPD, exceeding the 12 metres and 21 metre requirements between the development and surrounding existing residential properties. It is noted that the design of the proposed PBSA buildings has evolved during the course of the pre-app and application process to limit and reduce the number of north-facing rooms and incorporate oriel windows with constrained views to the east and west, away from residential properties to the north. In this regard, officers consider that the increased overlooking or loss of privacy as a result of the proposed development would be minimal, and the separation distances between the proposed buildings has been appropriately designed to protect the amenity of future residents of the site. In terms of daylight and sunlight, the development will result in 237 minor, 160 moderate, and 253 substantial adverse reductions in vertical sky component for surrounding properties. With respect to no skyline, there would be a total of 40 minor, 8 moderate, and 5 substantial reductions for surrounding properties. This equates to a total of 29% of windows assessed not meeting the BRE's recommendation for BSC, and 4% of rooms assessed not meeting the BRE guidance for NSL. The two images illustrate the sunlight and daylight impacts to number 251 and Parramatta House, respectively, when compared to the 2016 office scheme, show a noticeable reduction in windows which would experience a medium to high level. The impacts to 251 and Parramatta House are further broken down in these tables on the screen. The two tables the two tables show that when the existing situation is compared with the 2016 scheme, the proposed development, when the existing situation is compared with the 2016 scheme and the proposed development, the current scheme performs better with a considerable fewer BSC and NSL impacts, which would be outside the BRE guidance. Similarly, the bottom two tables show the improved outcome in terms of annual probable sun hours when compared to the 2016 scheme, with only one room out of 108 sitting outside the annual guidelines. Overall, while the majority of windows tested meet BRE requirements, it's noted that a relatively small minority of impacts would go beyond the recommended guidelines. However, these are not considered to be of such significance that would warrant a reason for refusal of an otherwise acceptable development. The proposed development includes a comprehensive package of public realm enhancements, which would have been designed to address all public visual frontages and improve pedestrian improvements, encourage social interaction, and enhance the overall aesthetic and functionality of the site. Works in Newington Causeway include a covered colonnade to create a sheltered walkway and entrance to the residential lobbies alongside this frontage. That's shown on the right-hand side of the screen on the image, as well as substantial landscape buffering and tree planting, which will separate the colonnade from the adjacent highway and offer visual screening and environmental comfort. One of the key elements is the creation of Skipton Circus, which is a new circular public realm space to London Road, which is situated between blocks A and B. Design intent is to provide a safe pedestrian environment away from vehicular traffic and includes a broad open space and landscaped area, seating and play features. At the centre of Skipton Circus is a community square, which has been designed to accommodate a range of temporary and informal uses, including lunchtime gatherings, pop-up markets, street performances and community events. The raised circular light is also proposed above the space to enable a safe and functional use of the space during. The public realm works extend to Ontario Street, which is currently hindered by bins at the junction with London Road, as well as an existing vehicle turning head, which restricts pedestrian movements. The proposal includes resurfacing the existing turning head and removal of level change across the street with access restricting to remove the access restricting pedestrians, cyclists, and service vehicles. The existing cycle superhighway and cycle docking station would be retained. However, the existing blue lane markings would be replaced with stone paving to delineate the footpath and also include tree planting and seating, which run linear to the CS7 route to further highlight the shared nature of the space and avoid user conflict. In total, over 2,000 square meters of public accessible space is proposed, which will be provided as a high quality, well-connected green place, which promotes pedestrian movement, sense of safety and security, and a much improved sense of place. The scheme will achieve an urban greening factor of 0.34, which includes a combination of 50 new trees on site, as well as green roofs, and accounts for an uplift in canopy area of over 600 square meters. There is identified capacity for additional trees to be planted on site to meet the urban greening factor target of 0.4, which will be secured as part of the Section 106 agreement, whereby payment of a financial contribution would be triggered in the event the urban greening factor score of 0.4 is unable to be achieved. The proposed development would also achieve a biodiversity net gain of over 18% in habitat units, representing a considerable uplift above the 10% policy requirement. The proposed development includes the provision of over 1,000 square meters of children's play space located at the ground floor along Newington Causeway at podium level and within the centre of the site and at levels 23 and 25 above the residence. The play space would cater for children up to 12 years of age, with older play proposed to be delivered off-site by way of a financial contribution. Carbon reduction measures have also been incorporated, including air source heat pumps and water source heat pumps for both buildings. That being said, there will still be a shortfall in carbon emissions to meet net zero, which will be met by an off-site payment. Just quickly touching on transport, the development is largely car-free, with the exception of 3 blue badge spaces located in the basement, provided for the residential buildings. It is noted that a financial contribution is included towards funding local on-street electric vehicle charging points on Keyworth Street. While not accommodated within the development, this is considered positive in supporting the council's sustainable development objectives and provides wider public benefit. The scheme would also provide cycle parking to meet the London Plan for the residential, student and commercial components. A payment towards pedestrian cycling and bus improvements will be secured in the 106 and will contribute to creating better permeability for pedestrians and cyclists accessing development from Newington Causeway as part of an active travel contribution. With regard to waste, sufficient waste storage areas have also been provided in the basement with sufficient drag distances and access arrangements via Ontario Street. In summary, the proposed scheme provides 40.3% affordable housing on site, which will be delivered as 28.4% social rent and 11.6% intermediate housing. In addition, it provides over 1,000 square meters of flexible medical service and office space and 944 square meters of flexible food and beverage and retail uses, with active frontages to London Road, Ontario Street and Newington Causeway. Further Section 106 contributions would be secured towards play space, carbon offset, training and apprenticeships, cycle hire docking stations, on-street vehicle charging points, car club membership, active travel improvements, loss of employment, loss of affordable floor space, urban greening and CCTV, totaling close to £3 million. The development would sit comfortably in the Curzon townscape, and whilst it would cause some limited harm to adjoining heritage assets, those harms would be outweighed by public benefits, which include the positive urban design aspect of the scheme, as well as the 106 contributions mentioned earlier. Whilst there would be some harm to neighbouring amenity in terms of daylight and sunlight, these are considered to be relatively minor. In conclusion, officers consider the application complies with the relevant provisions of the local plan, and therefore is recommended that planning permission be granted, subject to recommended conditions and completion of the Section 106 agreement.
Thank you. Questions? I'm going to ask one first, and I'm going to turn to Councillor Whittam. So it was just to get some advice from officers about what weight we need to apply to the 2016 scheme, which was approved by committee but not implemented. And I believe from the report the development was application was withdrawn, even though I think we're approving it. So just to give them that's, it's not an implemented scheme, just to understand the way we need to apply for that, because we're obviously where it's looking at the daylight and sunlight impacts, we're saying that that actually these are better than 2016 scheme, but we need to understand what weight we need to.
Yes, so that scheme was determined under the previous Select Plan. However, the current Select Plan would support the similar scheme in terms of it being in the town centre and in central activity zone, as indeed with the London Plan and also tall buildings. And in fact, current Select Plan has a commitment to both office provision and jobs provision in the north of the borough. So that scheme again is in line with both at regional, national, and local level. In terms of the weight that you can give it, I think it needs to be given a significant amount of weight, albeit the planning permission wasn't eventually issued, because it was a decision taken by committee to authorise that issue of a planning permission. And as you say, Richard, it was drawn subsequently. But nonetheless, the policy position from 2016 to date, in terms of an office of that scale and quantum, hasn't significantly changed.
Thank you. Councillor Whittam.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. I noticed that you didn't mention Ministry of Sound once in your presentation. And given that there's been agents of change from can you tell us the mitigation team agent of change?
Apologies. I can talk to that. In terms of noise impacts, the site is affected by road noise and noise from nearby businesses. Obviously, as you mentioned, notably the Ministry of Sound. Whilst the initial noise survey included noise from Ministry of Sound, it was agreed during the application process to conduct a more bespoke, more detailed measurement of breakout noise from the club. The dominant source of music noise breakout was identified as being noise from the Ministry of Sound courtyard sound system. At Skipton House, the noise climate was dominated by traffic and urban noise, although it was noted that some music noise from the Ministry of Sound courtyard was audible externally at the Skipton House, externally. Overall, the comprehensive assessment of the noise from the club has informed a facade design condition to meet an established internal sound level within the dwellings, in order to sufficiently protect the Ministry of Sound nightclub from unreasonable restrictions on their operation, but also protect the residents of the future development. And this has also been agreed by Southwark Council, Ministry of Sound, and the applicant.
So, after the application was submitted, spoke to the Ministry of Sound, the applicants, and we engaged an acoustic consultant to do some work. So the three consultants, the applicants, Ministry of Sound's consultants, and our consultant, the joint survey to establish sound levels, principally, as Chad said, from the courtyard. And the conditions we recommended were exactly the same internal sound level conditions as were approved by this committee by committee for Borough Triangle, and its internal sound levels that were established with the 251 Eileen House site. Ministry of Sound, and I think mentioned in the addendum, they have provided some comments. They're not objecting subject to an easement. That's in discussion with the applicant. That's outside of the planning regime. We're satisfied with conditions as proposed, that the agent of change principle is addressed, and Ministry of Sound's operation can continue the scheme going ahead.
Yes, please, Councillor Whittam.
Scheme. And I'm sure we through triple glazing to those units facing the nightclub. That's the available.
But
So for what the previous scheme,
Yes.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. So the
If you could repeat that from the start, so we've got that for the records. Thank you.
So the two student blocks would be closest to sound from Ministry of Sound. They can be readily insulated. I think the detailed facade solution will yet need to be designed, but it can be designed as it has been designed at 251, and it will be at Borough Triangle. The affordable homes are slightly further away at an angle, so they'll have openable windows. But again, as Stuart mentioned, because the nighttime noise from traffic is such, to have good sleeping accommodation, sleeping conditions, they'll need to close their windows, which will then prevent sound from Ministry of Sound coming in.
Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thanks for the report and the presentation. Just wanted to ask about the play space on the development. So I'm looking at page 58 of the table that is there, sets out the policy requirement and the proposed square footage of the play space. So am I right in just understanding that on the actual scheme itself it's significantly below the policy requirement, and I can see the line there about nearby play spaces and their contribution via section 106. Could you just tell me a little bit more about that to give me reassurance that overall we are going to be securing the kind of play space that we should be from this? And then I've got a follow up after that, but I'll stop there for now.
Sure, so I'll just pull up the table.
So the headings are slightly askew, which is what was confusing me.
I see. I think the table hasn't been followed through, so everything should be shifted to the right. I think the shortfall should be the proposed is on the far right column, the policy requirement. That makes sense. So the shortfall of about 800 square meters would be what the contribution is being secured.
Okay.
Yeah. And as I mentioned in the presentation, 0 to 12 years would be provided on site. At the diagram, at the terrace levels, on the upper levels of the residential buildings, as well as the podium level in the centre.
Okay. And just as a follow-up, Chair, if that's okay, there's nothing said in the report about the maintenance of the play spaces. I mean, that has been a problem in the developments and get nice facilities built, but they're not really maintained. What reassurances have we got that these are going to be facilities that are both constructed but also maintained properly?
There is a recommendation as part of the determination notice. There is a condition for a detailed design facade condition, as well as inclusion of detailed design of the play space. That would be secured. Secured.
I can also add, we have been discussing that very point with the applicants and asking them to design the play space and indeed the outdoor space such that a registered provider is able to maintain that. And it might be something the applicant can do as well.
Councillor Tester.
Thank you. I have one very small point of clarification first, which is on it's paragraph 435 on page 41 on our numbered thing. It's the number of objectors. It says 119, but there's 116 in objection to and support. I assume there's one that's neutral. That adds up to 118.
Sorry, that is correct. There was a double up of one of the representations.
Okay, so it's 118 total then.
That is correct.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you. Can I also ask my slightly more substantive question? Thank you. I
was just getting a little bit mixed up, and I think possibly it's related to Councillor Edwards' question. So the development is proposing, I think, just over 2,000 square metres of public open space. There's no, or at least I couldn't see in the report, kind of diagram of what's been counted as kind of public open space, because I wasn't sure if some of that area on Ontario Street is being counted. That seemingly to me is kind of just like highway improvements and parking space and whatnot, not necessarily kind of usable open space. Is that that's the communal, not just the actual publicly accessible part of it, because some of that's the podium.
So in terms of this diagram might clarify it a little bit more. There's sections of the site which are in between the highway. They're adjacent to the Class E uses, so Ontario Street on the left. That's all going to be paved and seating to improve the pedestrian walkability and access to the Class E, and that's mirrored on the far right on Newington Causeway to provide a buffer and a separation. There's also play on the way space provided in that section as part of the public open space. And then there's obviously Skipton Circus in the centre, which is a larger offering, as well as the colonnade underneath, which will access the Class E uses.
Okay. Any further questions? I'm going to go to Councillor Seaton as he's not asked a question yet, and then to Councillor Whitten.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just go to page, I want to get it back on my screen again, on viability, page 27, paragraph 93. Can I just ask the officer just to give us some commentary on these two paragraphs where the applicant has set out viability and we've sought to assess viability? Can you just further elucidate the commentary on viability and therefore deliverability of this project? I believe I've had at least two tries, Councillor Whitten, on this one. Is this a viable scheme? Is what I'm asking myself. Thank you.
Yes, it is a viable scheme. Our viability consultant and the applicants agree that there is a scheme that's viable.
You got a follow up then, Councillor Seaton?
Of course. There was a deficit noted here, okay, and what I'm trying to understand, I recall in previous reports we have these deficits which apparently grow over time, which apparently are the reasons for non-delivery. Can you explain that deficit and why you believe, notwithstanding that deficit, the scheme is deliverable?
I think on this scheme there's a surplus and there's a difference in opinion on the amount of the surplus, and we've mentioned that in paragraph 8 of the.
Okay, Councillor Whitten.
Lady said the urban greening factor is not before with consultation by adding some trees.
That's correct. There was a lot of discussion on this point. I think our urban forester officer identified capacity for 18 trees to be planted on the site. The applicant was not, has not agreed to the planting of those 18 trees, but there is capacity to facilitate additional planting, whether it's 18 or fewer. Officers were convinced that this could be secured through a contribution for the shortfall, and there could be a trigger mechanism to allow for exploration of planting of more trees, while also securing a monetary contribution for the shortfall.
So it will be 18 extra chosen points.
That's correct. That's the identified shortfall. Yep. 18.
Piece of the community.
That's correct. To contribute to the urban greening factor.
And that's secured by condition, effectively, is it? That process to identify whether.
Be a Section 106 obligation.
Section 106 obligation. So, but in terms of process, we're exploring the 18 trees, whether those can be planted and green with those of the developer. And if we're not able to agree all 8, those. That's what we want. That's basically how it works. I want to ask, have we got a registered provider identified for the site? And the reason I'm asking for this is, we obviously have had some applications in the past where they've looked great and then they've not been able to find a registered provider. And it does strike me that, there's some, the layout of this building and things might mean that some RPs are happier than others to take this on. So just and where things are with that. Again, might be a question for the applicant. But okay, we put that out with the applicant later then, if that's okay. We'll come to you later. That's fine. Yeah, thank you. Any further questions from members of the committee? Okay. In that case, we'll move on to representations. First of all, do we have anybody that wishes to speak in objection to the proposal? If those people would like to come forward. So I'll quickly run through how we will manage this. So I'll let you each just very briefly say who you are and what your interest is, whether you're a sort of local resident. As I said earlier, please do not disclose anything you would like to remain outside of the public domain because this is live stream. So please don't give your full address if you don't want that known to people. But so I'll allow you to quickly say who you are, and then I'll give you 3 minutes. And then after 3 minutes, committee members will ask you some questions. Sorry, yes, yeah, press the button and wait for it to go red, and then you're able to speak. Sorry, I should have said that, so apologies.
Hi, I'm a resident from 251 neighboring.
Very good. Just what's your name?
Gulberg.
Sorry?
Gulberg.
Gulberg. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Hello, my name is Jacob Dean. I'm a resident in Metro Central Heights.
My name is Nigel Bristow. I'm also a resident in Metro Central Heights.
You have 3 minutes.
So we're not against development per se, but this scheme is out of scale, lacking in sufficient public benefit, and in clear conflict with Southwark's policy P17. P17 states that tall buildings must be proportionate to the context, must step down to reflect surrounding height, and must offer genuine public value. As you've heard, this proposal includes 4 towers, 31, 30, and 2 at 21 stories, forming a dense single cluster. The stepping down is superficial. It's maximizing height and bulk 4 times in a row and will read as a monolith. The office's report calls this a commercial context, but that misrepresents the reality. Thousands of residents live nearby in Metro Central Heights, 251, Peronet House, Elephant Park. This is a residential area, and the impact on those homes will be huge and quite often detrimental. It will be 3 times the height of Metro Central Heights, which is directly and very short distance opposite it. Meanwhile, the public rooftop gardens from the previous scheme have been scrapped, and most of the so-called benefits are internalized or commercial or using the existing public highway. The proposal also involves demolishing the existing structure in direct contradiction to Southwark's climate goals. And the student housing claim is questionable given the saturation of the existing student provision and the declining demand due to falling recruitment.
2 quick further points from me. Comparisons with the 2016 consented scheme are an irrelevant consideration which should not be taken into account by the committee. That was a scheme for a site with a different footprint. It was in place 10 years ago when Elephant was a very different place. It was before the 2021 London plan, before the 2022 Southwark plan. Secondly, that we cannot keep simply throwing up tall buildings which are not supported by physical infrastructure nor other essential provisions such as healthcare. And neither the imposition of conditions nor the measly levy contributions proposed mitigate these adverse effects. The developer's own environmental impact assessment states in terms that the previously consented 2023 scheme for redevelopment of the existing building is still to be considered as a viable alternative.
And lastly, from my side, I am disappointed by this approval recommendation. So many objections were raised, almost 120 of them, and most of the concerns were not addressed in this final proposal. The report claims the impact on neighbors is minimal, but this is simply not true. At 251 alone, 120 flats are directly facing this new building. And half of these homes, including mine, will lose views, privacy, and sunlight, wiping out more than £3 million in combined value from our property. So these are not small side effects. These are really life-changing consequences for hundreds of residents. So I would like you to consider this serious consequences.
Thank you. That's the 3 minutes. Questions from members of committee? Councillor Seaton.
You said that the report doesn't address your objection. Can you maybe identify one or two of the issues you've raised that have not been addressed, please?
Simply the things like privacy, all this sunlight, always the conclusions versus the impacts are very minimal. So they didn't reduce any of the height of the buildings or anything in the design. So I think for me, this is not addressing it. And I think, again, in most of the comments we raised this, 251 has winter gardens, and these are like living spaces. And I think in the analysis, these were not greatly factored in.
Can I just add to that? There's a phrase which runs through the officer's report, is it is considered that the disbenefits and the proposed benefits are put in seen side by side. It is considered that. There's a real degree of lack of transparency there as to the factors which are put into place and whose opinion is being expressed. And it's important that it's these councillors tonight at this committee meeting, these elected people that take the decision, not the officers' report. And secondly, the thing that's, I don't think it is addressed in the officers' report is why the 2016 scheme is seen as a relevant consideration when we all know Elephant 10 years ago is simply unrecognisable.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from members of committee? Councillor Whittam.
Thank you very much. Is there anything about the 20 scheme?
Shorter, I think it was only 11 floors, so I would have preferred that one than this.
I think the rooftop garden is a very small gesture, but it speaks to the spirit behind both these two very different proposals. There is some notion that to give something back or actually to create something for Elephant and Castle. This proposal is entirely, as far as I can see, predicated on the notion that student housing is a cash cow. And I speak as a university lecturer. I know what's happening in student recruitment. I know the saturation in the area. I doubt that they will raise the money on it. But also, I think it's a very, very spurious claim to predicate the whole thing on.
Just add one point from the 2022 scheme. It had the advantage of being in compliance with London Plan Policy SD5, which, as paragraph 51 of the officer's report states that mixed-use developments should not lead to a net loss of office floor space within the CAZ unless there is no demonstrable prospect of the site being used for offices. So that was the 2022 scheme, which complied with that bit of the London Plan. The current scheme doesn't, in my opinion, because as the developers accept within their environmental assessment report, currently consented scheme, which is the August 2023 one, which is slightly different from it's mixed use redevelopment, have the additional 6 odd stories. They say that's still viable. It's still accept that that's still viable. So it seems to me that there isn't compliance with that bit of the money within the.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thanks for coming along. Thanks for sharing your views. Second speaker mentioned that there was no adequate provision of things like medical services as a result. That there is included in the proposal provision for further medical and health services floor space. So that is part of the scheme. Can I just get your response to that?
Sure. I mean, well, I think my concern is about the pressure which the introduction of it's over 1,000 odd residential properties would have on medical and healthcare provision. We all know how hard it is to get a GP appointment. It's unclear to me that designating some space within a development for healthcare leads to greater healthcare provision. I'm not sure quite how those necessarily fit together, particularly when I think we can see in the officer's report there's 211,000, which is part of the section 106 levy payment towards the provision of increased healthcare and mental provision, which is a visible amount to assist in what this area of the elephant really needs.
Councillor Bamby.
Yeah, thank you for coming in and for sharing your feedback. You seem to be expressing preference for schemes that have gone. Do you at all welcome the changes from the fact that it was previously come to committee twice as office space and is now come to committee as a building site that will be providing housing with the housing need that's required in the borough?
Well, obviously, affordable housing is something that's at a premium. So I think that's to be applauded. But I think that the committee would do well to think about the nature of the very transient population in the elephant, the density of that, and what that does to the sense of neighbourhood. So where they, which I don't believe they will for a moment, to fill this with the amount of students that they think they will, the number of students, they would find that they will not integrate in the community in the same way that, say, people who are resident there for more than 3 years at a time. It just doesn't happen. So I think they need to think very carefully about the usage in terms of housing. I'm not against increased residential capacity, obviously. That's a good thing.
From my perspective, maybe I slightly different view because it is really directly facing my flat. I would have preferred office space because at least during the daytime there will be students and later on it will be high price. So I would have preferred office. But if it really needs to be affordable homes, I agree that I think the student population doesn't help the nearby area. I already live in 251. From Friday to Saturday, every night, students are already making so much noise around. I cannot even imagine doubling that number, but it would create for the residents high social behavior.
Thank you. Councillor Tester.
Thank you, and thank you for coming along and kind of reflecting it's really a resident perspective on these sort of things. I noticed that you are like on Southwark Bridge Road. I was wondering, as residents, have you spoken to anyone in Baronet House and in those sort of other immediate residential areas? Because I think our officers report, it seems as though those kind of daylight sunlight interventions seemingly are more impactful perhaps on Baronet House on 251 as well than they are maybe on Metro Central Light. So I was wondering if there have been kind of conversations in the community with those residents of Baronet House.
Could I just speak very quickly on that? The officer's report did not adequately reflect what would happen to South Block and West Block of Metro Central Heights. It is 3 times the height of those buildings. So all the heritage sites, the Westminster, the Eye, the BT Tower, all wiped out with a stroke. So that's from Metro Central Heights. Paranet House, well, I've spoken, it's not a very substantial sample. I've spoken to one person who lived there who said, she blinked and she said, how big? Pointed at your building and said, like that, times 4?
I'll just add, there are, I think, you pointed out 116 objections. I imagine that one can infer a few.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing any indication. So I want to thank you all for going forward. You know, as a number of committee members have said, it's always really useful for us to hear from local members and to sort of talk through their objections. And you certainly, I think, given us food for thought for further questions that we'll want to ask to the applicants and to council officers before we make any decisions. So thank you very much for coming forward. I've had a request for a 2-minute comfort break, so I'm going to allow that. So apologies, we will adjourn for 2 minutes and return at after 2 minutes. Thank you. So if anybody else thinks very much. Apologies for that slightly extended break. We now turn to the applicants and the applicants' agents. So I'd like you to first of all introduce yourselves, and as before, you'll have 3 minutes in which to present to the meeting.
Good evening, Councillors. Springer, Development Director of Properties. We've been the owners of this building.
Sorry, and do your colleagues want to introduce themselves quickly as well?
Sam Hine from Deacon with the planning agency.
Simon Topless, HCA with and available.
Thank you. You've got 3 minutes.
Our proposal is 243. 20% we have rooms, a major public open space, which is 6 tennis courts size, active ground floor retail, and 1,400 student accommodations. Skipton House was occupied for many years by the Secretary of State for Health, vacant for a number of years. London Regional, my company, have been looking at the site for many years to work out what is the best use for it and what is viable. Gone down the route of refurbishing the office building, we've gone down the route of extension PSC scheme for all offices, and we've got the SOM scheme, which was earlier, mixed use. None of these schemes are viable. It's not there. We've had extensive public consultation, and Ministry of Sound met the Harriet Courthouse residents, London South Bank University, and we've been presenting to the council partnership as well as a couple of councillors. This is an unbelievable location for student accommodation because it's on top of the station and the bus route and major traffic. It's right next door to London South Bank University, near Guy's University, the University, and LSE. The demand for this type of accommodation on top of a transport hub is there. We wouldn't be undertaking a 300 million development unless there was demand there. The question asked earlier about the design of residential, but extensively with 3 housing associations to get the design correct, looked at aspects to do with service charge and all different aspects, so that the scheme has been designed with HTA, so it's exemplar for a housing scheme for housing. Also discussions with the team at Southwark, together with the GLA, so we funding for GLA to be compliant, which is a difficult itself. If this scheme is granted, we believe it will complete the vision for the regeneration of the road-free system that's always part of the. This site is viable. Wish to get on and deliver it. To deliver the 40%.
Sorry, that's your 3 minutes. I'm going to Councillor Edwards.
Just going to say I'm the development director and the project director to ensure this gets delivered.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to ask about the demand for student accommodation, because that was quite a significant part of what the objectors had to say earlier. They say, one of the people who's among the objectors says they work in higher education and then they know there's not going to be the demand. You say this is a £300 million development and you're confident there is, but can you tell us a little bit more about why you're confident?
We employed for research Knight Frank, who have a specialist department for affordable housing, and they have written papers and papers which form part of our planning application of demand. In discussion with banks to get this funded, they've done their own research to say they will fund us to develop this because they believe that the market is there for this. If this scheme was in a different location south of the borough, it wouldn't be as popular to get it funded and demand, but because this is right on top of the transport hub, right next to the universities and the new university opening up, they say, and we're prepared to put our money where our mouth is, that there is demand. Within our scheme, which is really important, is the amount of amenity space we have, which is way above the local or the London plan, because we believe that it's a flight to quality, and the amenity is 30,000 square feet of amenity in a building. We will have superb gym facilities, everything that the students will want, faith rooms, you name it. This building will have it. Be the best technology that you will have for a building. So we believe with the specification, the extra money we're putting into it, we will get it let. On top of that, we've got, I think it's 19 different room types. So it will appeal for different types of users or clients, and they are our clients. Because we want them to be here for the 3 years, not come one day and go the next. So it's all about the quality and the variation of room types to attract those students.
It's just worth adding that in that report Jeff mentioned, they identify 8,500 students who are living in the private rented sector and HMOs within a mile of the site. It's those students who are in accommodation which is not designed specifically for them. It doesn't have the same amenity. This scheme would provide exactly what they need.
Councillor Tester.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to talk about the kind of flexible medical space that's being proposed in there. And a few years ago, I had a conversation with one of the former ward councillors for 251 Southwark Bridge Road, and they mentioned that there was meant to be a medical provision in the ground floor of 251, but despite the fact that some of the funding was there from the development and there was the need for it, that the NHS wasn't actually willing to put anything into medical kind of facilities in that building. What sort of have you scoped out in terms of a kind of future occupier of that? What sort of thing are we looking at? Because obviously flexible medical services could really be anything. It could be a private dental practice, which is probably not really what the area needs, and it would be useful to get a bit of a steer from you about those conversations.
We have had discussions with NHS. They are looking to have a new facility at Elephant Park. If that doesn't come off, we're their fallback situation. If there is demand from the Prince's, the facility on the other side of the road to us, which is a dilapidated NHS facility, we can offer them a new facility. So the idea is that we've always wanted to have the facility on site because one, it services our community, but also the community on the north of the Joe Rotary, where to go to the NHS facilities are to the south. So we've made the provision. We've got it within our planning application. It's as a financial, it loses money, but we put it in there, and we, in an ideal world, would love to have it there. And if we are lucky enough to get planning permission this evening, we will go back to the NHS, say we've now got our planning permission, come to us.
Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, yes, I've had at least 2 bites of this particular chair with yourselves, I believe. And you heard my earlier question as to whether or not this is a scheme that is deliverable. You say yes, if you're lucky enough to gain planning permission. Can I just first of all just question yourself in regards to the report, my earlier question to officers, so whether there's a surplus or a deficit, and if there's a deficit, how would you overcome that deficit? my first part of my question. Second part of the question is, if you were lucky enough to obtain planning permission tonight, at least indication from officers, from ourselves as a committee, how soon would you commence the development?
Great questions, thank you. First of all, it is profitable, and it's working with our viability people together with the viability clusters from the local authority. It is viable and everyone agrees it's viable. Because it's viable, we're able to offer 40% affordable housing, because every square foot of affordable housing you build, you lose about £300 a square foot. So it's viable. Getting on site, if it's granted this evening, we start work on Monday to go to the different stages of drawings, which the first stage is stage 3, and then stage 4, which is to go through Gateway. That takes approximately 12 months to go through that process, and then it's then 12 months, unfortunately, going through Gateway. When I did a seminar with the Elephant and Castle Partnership, together with partners, one of the partners from HTA, we explained to them the problems that we developers and contractors have, which is going through this gateway. So it takes a year to get through the drawing process and a year to get the HSC to actually grant you the permission. They're hoping to bring that quicker, but that's outside our hands. We can only provide it as quickly as we can, the information. We start negotiations. We've already started negotiations with 3 contractors who are well known to the borough, who have previously done construction within the borough, so they understand the rotary system and everything else to deal with that. So we're aiming by the end of stage 3 drawings, which is about March, April, to tender the project, and then work with them through stage 4 drawings, so that when it goes to the gateway people, it's a fully detailed design. The cost for us to get to that stage is about £7 million. And yeah, so we're doing it as quickly as we can. We're fast tracking it. And we've started the process. But no one's got an order until Monday morning, if we get granted. Does that answer your?
If I may, and thank you for that response. It's much clearer, slightly clearer than your last time you were here. You see, that's fine. Don't worry, I'm okay with that. I'm very conscious, though, Chair, that Elephant Castle has a high concentration of student accommodation. I think we've approved at least 7 or 8 various applications within a quarter-mile radius of the location. And I accept, of course, that we have 2 or 3 universities clustered in close proximity. But nevertheless, there is quite a lot. Is there a threshold percentage of students take-up that you require in order to proceed with this development? I'm just very conscious now. We speak in planning policy terms. We should hear at this meeting, but in reality, it's the commercial terms that we need to ask the question: is this deliverable? And if there is a minimum of student accommodation you need to secure before proceeding, what is that threshold number? Just so we understand the state of play for yourself and indeed for the rest of the market.
There is no threshold.
Okay.
Because there is no threshold. As a business, we run about 25,000 hotel beds around the country and around the world. Every morning, we lose our customers. They go home. So it's no different to that market, except here we have a 40-week or 50-week stay. And so therefore it's a safer investment for us. So we understand the bed business, and student accommodation is an extension to our hotel business. So that is more risky than that of student. And that's why getting the funding from the banks for this is so much easier, and why we can deliver it and deliver, most importantly for the community, the 243 affordable units.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitton.
The housing provider, yeah. Can you tell us about them and how committed they are? Are they going to pull out the last minute like the others?
That part I can't answer. That's down to the government whether they're going to give the housing providers the money. I've had this specially prepared for tonight's meeting from DS2, our consultants, and who we've met with these people. We've been speaking and working with Carrion, L&Q, Notting Hill Genesis, as well as Peabody, and even though they're not within the borough, Sovereign Network Group. All these people have said to us, once we go to the next stage, they will entertain with us a proposal with us. We've actually done further work with L&Q in coming up with a solution. If they haven't got the money, that we will build it for them. We will own it, and they will take a management contract from us to deliver them, which is a new look at how we can deliver. We're looking at different ways of delivering the social housing, because if they haven't got the money, then they manage it, and we get the income, obviously, to pay the interest rates on it. So we're being forward thinking, if there is no money out there, how we actually do deliver it. And I can supply your officers with paper that we've sent to L&Q. We're working with L&Q on that, because we understand exactly your point, that they might not be there, no one might be there because they haven't got the money, but we're looking at different ways of actually delivering it to L&Q, because they're the people who are they're not our preferred people, but people who are more open to cleverer ideas of coming up with that solution for delivery.
I just add, in terms of the design of the homes, they're all completely compliant with London Planners, as explained, but we went through quite an extensive round of engagement with all of those registered social landlords to ensure that they would all meet all of their requirements as well. So we did 2 rounds of issuing our information, sharing it with them, reviewing it with them, and then changing our designs as part of this process alongside the pre-apps we had. So we've been through a really diligent process of designing the homes so that they meet all of the housing association's requirements.
In turn, that's also the GLA's fast track people, so they have signed it off because all the information, as Simon has said.
So just to summarise, it's not a done deal, but L&Q have expressed some sort of interest, and they've been actively involved in the process of the design.
Correct. And Crillian and Notting Hill.
Oh, okay. So
we've had 3. We haven't just gone with one guy in case he pulls out.
Yeah.
We've gone with 3 who are 3 of the 14 leading people. So we've made sure that their brand standards, if that's a nice way to call it, is met. So it's good for all housing associations. We've done this 2-stage of workshops with these different organisations.
Thank you. Councillor Whitton.
Can you tell us who you're working with for the student accommodation?
We'll be the operators, and we go into our bed fund, which we've got all the beds around hotel rooms. We will have managed either with ourselves or with Homes for Student, who've been advising us all the way through the design program to make sure that we are fully compliant and that it is the right scheme, that everything is in a management terms correct. And when we go into the stage 2, 3 and 4 drawings, it's really the MEP, the mechanical and the heating, how that is managed and how not only on that side but also on the affordable side is to keep the running costs of the buildings low. It's all electric, but the most important thing is that the management costs are kept to a minimum in respect of running costs, because for every pound we can save of electricity, it makes the scheme more viable.
Yeah,
Will there be a student management plan? Student management plan?
There will be, yes, and we will work with officers with that. So I imagine that's a condition. But yes, there will be a fully managed student management, and working with the Housing Association will have a fully managed plan for that.
I wanted to ask about the loss of commercial space. So, this is a preferred commercial location in terms of offices, and your previous 2022 application was for office space. And as a council, we have given permission last couple of years, but probably about 3 years ago, for office provision in the area, and so there seemed to be some demand not that long ago for office space there. So just to talk us through the reasons, and you heard from local residents that they would have been happier if this had been office space rather than residential space. So just to talk us through that situation and what's happened to the office situation with commercial provision, and why, given the permission you had not that long ago, why that's been shown to be non-viable.
Okay. My specialist subject, if you'd like to call it, is office development. I much prefer to have done an office development here because that's what our business is, apart from the hotel side. It's completely unviable. The location, we wanted to do the refurbishment, it didn't financially work. And through our demand studies, which we did with SOPs and again with Knight Frank, there wasn't demand there. When we did the scheme, the PSC scheme, which I thought was the most unbelievable scheme, it was brilliant, but the demand isn't there. And the costs for that development doesn't, and the rents we would achieve and the investment yield you would get for it would not be profitable. Most of the tenants, proposed tenants in the area, are going to the north of the borough by the River Thames, and that is where the concentration for office occupiers wish to go. Unfortunately, they don't want to come to Ellenborough Castle, and we would have had a huge amount of offices. I think it's 300,000 square feet, and the risk profile was too high, and there wasn't the rental to actually cover the costs.
Worth adding as well, the existing buildings have been marketed for 2 years, which is, I think, your policy, without any interest coming forward.
Thank you. I think I saw Councillor Seaton next.
Thank you, and thank you for your earlier responses on commercial side, and that is very unfortunate. My ward abuts Ellenborough Castle, and would like to see far more officers there, but I understand the market condition. A question is my next question is a completely different subject, and that's to do with the design of these buildings. And I'm slightly out of sync maybe, but the question of whether there were due calls for fire exit and so on. I can't determine this by the initial presentation by officers, but I note on page 96 of the report here, and that's paragraph 310, that the design review panel accepted that the proposed height and massing of the development, acknowledging its central London location and the skillful articulation of its form. However, it expressed concern that the density and quality of the accommodation, particularly the student housing issues highlighted included overcrowded calls, inadequate shared spaces, and poor design features of the single aspect rooms and lack of appropriate play space for children. What would your comment be in response to the design review panel?
If I told you the truth, you wouldn't want to hear it. So can I please give you?
So the design review panel reviewed the scheme quite early in its development, so we were able to address all of those points. Jeff touched on the 3,200 square meters of community space that's provided for the students. That addresses the amount of it, the provision of it. The quality we went through.
Also, that's above the GLA policy.
That 3,200 square meters of amenity for students provides a ratio that's much greater than any other PBSA development. So not only is quantum, the amount per person is very high, much higher than schemes approved in the borough before. So we think it's a very good quantum. In terms of the quality, we went through 17 pre-app reviews with officers to refine and develop that design and make sure it's of best quality. So we have a really distributed range of uses within that high quantum of accommodation for the students. In terms of the rooms, they also changed significantly post that DRP. We introduced a number of bay windows along the north for all of the student rooms on the north side for two reasons. One is to address that concern about outlook and views for those student rooms, which was raised at the DRP. But the other is to protect the privacy of 251. So those bay windows ensure angled views away from 251. So that was a key response from the DRP. The other issues in terms of, I think you touched on the dual core for fire, so and overcrowding. We changed the design of the corridors to introduce daylight into those corridors and increase the width and size of those corridors post the DRP to make them feel less overcrowded. We also introduced amenity spaces at intermediate floors that would allow those corridors to access those, so that there was more daylight into those corridors. So we changed the design significantly from the DPA to address that comment. And in terms of the fire safety, went through an extensive process with our fire engineers to ensure this was fully compliant. All of the calls have dual stairs for escape and dual means of escape in every one of those calls.
Did you want to ask a question, Councillor Banby?
Sorry, Chair. Why wasn't a subsequent DRP undertaken then post all these changes? Seems a bit irrelevant having a DRP for a previous design.
We went through a number of perhaps with officers and felt that it was agreed that we'd address the comments. The application could come forward. I think it might be suitable to ask that question to officers as well.
Okay, I'll let you save that one up, Joseph, until later. All right. Councillor Tester.
Thank you. You mentioned in your response to the previous standing questions from Councillor Seaton about the PSC scheme, and obviously that one was proposing to sort of retain part of the building structure, and obviously given the kind of environmental impact of demolishing a building, and also the nearby example, should we say, of an office building being converted into residential at Metro Central Heights. Was there ever at any point you considered, retaining part of the building structure or building on that scheme to try and retain it in some way, shape or form?
Yes, as part of the design development, we looked at a student scheme that retained the full existing structure. That wouldn't have delivered any affordable housing on the site, was a key challenge with that. So we couldn't deliver the same quantum of student accommodation, being able to deliver any affordable housing nor would we have been able to make the public realm improvements. Skipton Circus was a big part of the design journey for us, so really making that space outside the station, therefore, for all of the local residents as well as our residents, was an important part of it. So that in the end, in the balance, we felt that the retention scheme wouldn't delivered all the benefits.
You don't demolish anymore, you deconstruct. Is the in word. So the worst part of the site, which you can't deconstruct, is the basement, where all the concrete is in reality. We're keeping the existing piles, we're keeping the basement. The steel will go back to the factories and be reused. The windows will go back into be recycled. The glass will be recycled. So a great majority of this has to be recycled to get a BREEAM rating. We can't just dump it like in the old days. So that's where we're coming from, is a deconstruction and reuse. And maybe even the glass and the aluminium will end up back in this site, because to get your BREEAM rating, you need over 75% of the content of the aluminium for the windows to be recycled, and the same with the glass. So I would hope that we get some of the windows back.
Okay. Not seeing any further questions, so I want to thank you for coming forward. It's been very helpful for us. Thank you. If you'd like to return to the seating area. I've not been notified of any, but do we have any supporters of the scheme that live within 100 metres? Wish to address the meeting? Do we have any ward councillors? I don't see any present. In that case, do we have, arising from those representations, any further questions of officers? I'm going to go to Councillor Banby first, and then to Councillor Tester.
Thank you. Just clarity on why a subsequent DRP wasn't undertaken.
It's not normally standard for us to take schemes back to the DRP when officers actually think that the earlier criticisms. We're wasting the DRP's time. It's almost like a tick box exercise for them. We have plenty of schemes that are queuing up to go to the DRPs, so we tend not to take them back when we think that they've met their concerns. So we were happy with.
Wouldn't it be for the DRP to be satisfied with the concerns, or if you see what I mean? Because they've obviously assessed it, come back with some improvements that are required. The developers made the improvements, but it's now officers who are making the decision on whether those improvements are satisfactory or not.
Ultimately, the DRP are there to help officers, and we bring them on board to them to offer their expertise, but that doesn't mean we're redundant. It's our views which are the key things in terms of how we judge those policies and the quality of the scheme against those policies, that ultimately it's for us to reach a recommendation, not for the DRP. So we kind of use the DRP as a sounding board. So we take their views and we assess them against our own views. And as I say, if we feel that the scheme architects have managed to satisfy those DRP concerns, that's fine for us. We're happy to.
Councillor Tester.
Thank you. Just in the presentation from the objectors, they raised a couple of points around kind of the value of their properties and losing views of kind of landmarks and things like that. And I just wanted to get clarification from the officers that these aren't necessarily kind of material planning considerations that we can kind of consider when making our judgment.
Yes, Councillor Tester. So private views from someone's home is not, that's a material consideration, and equally changes in values of properties, again, they're not material considerations.
That's helpful, thank you. Any further questions for officers? Councillor Seaton.
Just a quick one. Note that the objectors at least inferred that policy per P17, that tall building policy, was not being complied with. Would officers make a comment on in response to the objectors noting P17 as being a policy not being complied with?
P17 is our tall building policy. I think in terms of the report, we run through all the sections of P17 are actually quite comfortable with the development in terms of P17. I think the objectors mentioned whether the height was proportionate. We found the scale to be proportionate given the town centre location. We didn't think they highlighted the fact that it was so tall compared to its context. Well, Eileen House is 130 metres tall. This reaches, I think, its maximum, including plant, 101 metres. So it's comfortably below Eileen House. In fact, it sits below what we call the knuckle, which is the bottom. There's an angle to Eileen House. It sits comfortably below that point. We felt that there was a good relationship with the other tall buildings, including Metro Central around the town centre. Metro Central is actually comprised of four blocks, one of which reaches 56 metres. So it certainly wasn't 4 times the height of that building. So we found that, in terms of that, it was quite comfortable. And as was discussed in the presentation, there was a spiraling down of heights, so it gestures to bring the scale down towards gyratory, which we thought was regarded as successful.
Councillor Tester.
Just quickly on that, are you able to point to which building is Metro Central Heights, or at least the one that was being referenced as being 3 times as small, if that makes sense? I can't quite work out from there which one it is. I think you'd be able to see it on the one looking east.
All right. Yeah, I know you're trying to help, but please, if you can avoid interrupt. I think if you go back to slide 49, I think. Sorry, on our one, which yeah. That's the taller bit of Metro Central, but yeah, I mean, obviously it depends where you are in Metro Central because they're not all the same height, but yeah. I think that's right, isn't it? Yeah.
Sorry, yes, that's correct. That's block A of Metro Central. Thank you, but if you go to the listing, the original listing, they describe them as A, B, C, and D.
Okay, but it is part of Metro Central Heights. Sir, do you want to come forward? And if you could just very quickly come forward, just so we can be clear on this point. So this is the view looking east.
So if you look at the small image at the top right hand is the section line. So it's a set. So this is an image looking and there's arrows on it. So the arrows are looking in the direction of the view.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, we've tried to explore that one. I have been relatively lenient in terms of allowing the objectors to sort of challenge that, but okay. So I think there appears to be some disagreement on that, which we'll just have to leave that there. I think. Any further questions for officers on this? Okay. Can I sort of get some views from members of the committee where people are on this? I'm going to go with Councillor Edwards first.
Yeah, I mean, with any significant development like this in densely populated part of it is clearly going to have an impact. I'm not dismissing that in any way whatsoever. But my feeling is that, in particular, the contribution that this is going to make to building of affordable and social rented housing is incredibly important. Because that's what we as councillors are told time and time again by residents of is something they want to see. This would make a very significant to the building of those kinds of property. I am persuaded by what the officer said about the balance of impacts in terms of the in what is, let's be absolutely clear, is a part of central London, in an area of central London that does have particularly a large amount of tourism as well. So, of course, that doesn't mean a zero impact on people. Of course, there is an impact that has to be considered. But I think, on balance, in particular because of the contribution that's been to affordable social rented housing, this is something that I would be minded to agree to move, taking into account all the other issues that we've heard.
Thank you. Councillor Tester.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat the kind of comments by Councillor Edwards on housing. I completely agree. I think it's a substantial kind of contribution in a very central part of London, which, obviously doesn't get as much sort of social rented housing perhaps coming forward as it might do. There's a lot of things that come forward like contributions, and this isn't. And I think that's a really important aspect of the application. I think I really do appreciate the kind of concerns around scale and the massing. It is obviously going to be a substantive change, but I think any development on this site, which clearly needs development because it's been vacant for so long, it would be of a substantive scale. I am actually quite impressed with the public open space offering. I think on our members pack sort of slide 56 has got a really nice CGI of Skipton Circus, which I think actually looks really good. I think a lot of attention has been paid to how this will look on the ground floor when you get out of the Bakerloo line at Elephant Castle and Castle Station. I think it looks really kind of human scale for a very tall building, and I think actually not necessarily all of the developments that I've seen as sitting as a member of this committee have necessarily paid that much attention to that real kind of human scale. So I really do want to commend that. I think particularly as well, when looking at sort of such a tall building, it's really nice to sort of see the kind of variation in materials that you have, particularly on the social rented blocks. They look really attractive. They've got these sort of lovely kind of bricks and lines, and I'm not an architect, I don't really know how to do the words, but I think they look fantastic, and I think it's really nice to see sort of attention to detail on social rented and affordable housing. I think that's really fantastic. So I think, kind of notwithstanding the concerns of residents, and I think, they're obviously really valid, and I do really understand where you're coming from, but I think any development on this site would probably have similar impacts, and I think we do ultimately want to balance it out with the kind of public benefit of having such a high portion of on-site affordable housing. So I would be minded to support it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Whitton.
Yeah, as with Councillor Edwards and Councillor Tester, I agree wholeheartedly with their assessment. And I'd just like to add that a lot of that housing is family housing. 58 3-bedroom houses. It's an immense benefit to our residents, and people are crying out for that size of home, and it will give security to those families. They will have enough space to live and grow without the mega rents of the private sector. Just like to add also, I do share concerns about the objective about the amount of student housing, and if it's going to get filled, because we built a whole load of children's spaces in primary schools. Now we're closing them. And I do have that concern. Students will disappear in similar fashion. Notwithstanding that, I did to approve.
Thank you. I just on that point. I think it is an issue, isn't it, about the student numbers and how sustainable that is. However, we obviously as an authority have to respond to not only our own plan but the local plan and the national framework. And in particular, the London plan tells us that we need to be providing an extra 10,000 student places in London. So I think our concerns about student numbers, I think, would be overruled in terms of any appeal by that consideration. And so that's not something that we could use to sustain an objection. I think it's an interesting development. There are certainly some pluses and minuses. I think in terms of the pluses, it's those points that I think have been made by committee, is the fact that we are desperately short of social housing, particularly social housing that meets family needs, and this is providing it, and it's providing it at a level that is not just at the lowest possible level to be compliant with policy. It's over and above the policy levels, are giving us that 40% level of housing, and social housing levels that's in excess of our threshold for that as well. So that is certainly something that's to be welcomed. The few and I certainly agree with the points about how it improves the public realm, by the region as well. I think weighed against that, obviously, is very clearly the impact about the height on neighbouring buildings, and impact in terms of, I think, daylight and sunlight in particular. To me, that it goes back to that very first question I asked of officers, is we had a bigger scheme that had a bigger impact that had been previously agreed, and whilst that application obviously ultimately didn't end up in getting planning permission, it was approved by this council, and therefore if we were to object on those grounds, we would need to think very carefully about why that previous decision by our planning committee did set a precedent for what I feel that would probably be very difficult to sustain a appeal. My one other slight concern about this is this is obviously a very constrained site. That's created some issues in terms of our provision of open space and play space, children, and I wish there was more of that there, but I recognise it's a constrained site and it's difficult to do anything within those parameters to make this work otherwise. So I think given that balance, my view is also to approve the application. Does anybody else wish to speak, or should we move to a vote? Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair, and I of course fully agree with all what's been described. I do want to just highlight an area of caution and concern that, as you know, more than 10 years ago, that Elephant Castle is one of a handful of areas agreed with the mayor would be a central activity zone, essentially a commercial census. It does appear that the development brought forward generally are not commercial. Okay? They may have some cultural features, but not commercial. I'm not going to comment on the student accommodation and why that's currently in vogue. It's apparently commercially viable. I'm not going to argue on that point. I might have to question figures in regards to a saturation point within a quarter-mile area and what it does to a community. Yeah, I think that's a real consideration, at least for myself as a ward that abuts, as I said, Elephant Castle. But I welcome the affordable homes. Yes, absolutely. I welcome the innovation in the design in response to the wonderful design panel. I welcome the response and thank you for that very clear response. It is a constrained site, so it is a bit of a challenge for rural families to live on what is I know we're in the centre of London, but notwithstanding County Witham, I've met some of these families who live in some of these buildings. For young people, I have to wonder about the long-term impact on their lives, living in what is essentially a concrete jungle. But on balance, the whole purpose of a planning commission, of course, is for us to make decisions that are in the best interest of the community based upon our planning policy, which has been agreed by the community and by the Secretary of State. And on balance, whilst I have some concerns about the medium and long-term implications for this particular development and a number of other neighbouring developments, on balance, I'm likely to vote in favour of this application.
Thank you. Councillor Banby is the only person who's not expressed a view on this yet. Do you want to say anything? No compulsion either way.
I think I obviously sympathise with many of the objections, but I think an exciting development and I welcome it.
Okay, I think on that we're going to move to a vote. So I would like to propose that we accept the recommendation as set out in the report. So I've moved that we adopt the officer's recommendations as set out in paragraphs 1 to 6 of the report on page 265 of the main agenda pack. Firstly, planning permission be granted subject to conditions, the applicant entering into the appropriate legal agreement and referral to the Mayor of London, and that the Director of Planning Growth be authorised to add and make any amendments, make amendments to the conditions. Secondly, the environmental information be taken into account as required by Regulation 26(1) for Town and Country Planning, Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations of 2017, and that Planning Committee, in making decisions, had due regard to potential equalities impacts that are outlined in the report, and following the issue of the Planning Commission, the Director of Planning Growth writes to Secretary of State, notifying them of the decision pursuant to Regulation 31A, the Town and Country Planning Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2017, and that following the issue of the Planning Commission, the Director of Planning Growth place a statement on the Statute Register pursuant to Regulation 28(1) of the Town and Country Planning Environmental Impact Assessment Regulations 2017, which contains information required by Regulation 28, and for the purposes of Regulation 28(1)H, being the main reasons and considerations on which the Planning Committee's decision was based, shall be set out in that report, and that in the event the requirements of Recommendation 1 are not met by the 31st of December 2025, the Director of Planning Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission if appropriate for the reasons set out in paragraph 427 of a report. Does any member of the committee wish to second this recommendation? I saw Councillor Whittam get there, I think, just about first. So, Councillor Whittam, how do you wish to vote on the recommendation?
For Chair.
Councillor Seaton.
For Chair.
Councillor Banby.
For Chair.
Councillor Tester.
For Chair.
Councillor Edwards.
For Chair.
and Councillor Richard Livingstone. I'm also voting for the recommendation, so the motion is passed. Planning permission is approved. Shall we take a quick 5-minute break until the next item? you to the Plan Committee, and thank you for those people waiting for this final item. Just before we do go on to it, as one or two people reminded me, I'm going to point out that I am a ward councillor for this site, but I am, as a ward councillor, remaining an open on how I will be voting on this matter. So, make a declaration. And that brings us to item 11.1, which is 301 to 303 Ilderton Road. And I think I'm to present on this item.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for demolition of existing building and construction of 15-story building comprising a purpose-built student accommodation with commercial floor space. As you can see from the image there, and this slide to show where the location is. On the bottom image show the Old Kent Road opportunity area, and it's located at the eastern side of the borough. And the application site is outlined in red. It's got a triangular shape and it's relatively small. And in terms of size of it, it's 0.057 hectare. And as you can see from the images, so to the east of the site is the railway embankment. And then looking at the top images, you can see further down the road, there's a constructed building, 313 Ilderton Road. And then on the left-hand side, you can see the Tuscan Estate to the west of the site as well. In terms of policy destinations, the site is within the site allocation NSP 70, within flood zone 3, and there's no designated heritage access. And the current PTEL rating is 3. As you can see from the image on the right, is the kind of policy map. In terms of the site allocation, the site within site allocation 16. So the mainly is expecting them to come forward with mixed-use redevelopment, delivering new homes and replacing existing on-site employment force space. Again, the application site is outlined in red. And there is an existing extent permission for 15-story building with a 59 conventional residential home, as you can see in the image. It was granted in 2023. It will be helpful to set out the context of the site to see why we've got another application putting forward in front of the committee today. So back in 2018, so the applicant submitted a planning application initially for 12-story of the buildings for 46 residential dwellings. And following the grant of the planning permission of the first planning permission, the applicant secured an offer from HSPG to purchase a affordable unit, subject to amendments to the approved scheme. And HSPG's key requirements included the provision of a second core, a first lift, separate access for surface and management, an entire floor dedicated to affordable housing, i.e. no mixed tenure floors combining social, intermediate, or private units, primarily for management reasons. So these changes have been incorporated into the second approved scheme that I showed you earlier. Unfortunately, due to market challenges in 2023, HSPG withdrew the offer, so they are no longer acquiring the affordable unit. Subsequent to that, the applicant tried to market the site to over 10,000 of the contacts they've got, and they also marketed it to registered provider active in London and also in the borough. They also tried to sell the site as well, but unfortunately, with all this marketing effort, even with the reduced offer, there's no offer coming forward from RP. As you can see on the right-hand side table, there are some reasons cited by the registered provider why they were not interested in the affordable unit in the extend scheme. Primarily, there's 5 reasons. One is the size of the scheme. So they think 16 units below the minimum threshold that they would normally take on. Usually they were looking for 15 plus units. And also the building height, they're reluctant to take on, tall building due to associated cost and regulatory risk. They don't like share core for many different reasons, as I mentioned earlier. And there's some existing commitment with some other scheme that they have within the program, and they saw it as some viability challenges already. And also they've got other funding priorities because they have to focus on upgrading the existing housing stock. So all of these, some of them, they are like market challenges. You might argue that they may change in the future, but some of it, they're very site specific in terms of the size of the site, in terms of the height of the site and the quantum of the scheme. So our property team has also been consulted, and they are also satisfied that the developer is unlikely to be able to find an RP, and the council itself would not be interested in taking on the 16 affordable units in the extend scheme either. So subsequent to all of that effort, the applicants have confirmed that it would not be viable to deliver the extend scheme without an RP. That's the directly reason why we are seeing the scheme we've got now, which is a PBSA scheme, 69 student bed space with light industrial floor space on the ground floor, as you can see on the right-hand side image. Just kind of the basement is for the, bike store, refuse, etc. And then the commercial units are annotated in, highlighted in red. So they've got the entrance from the Ilderton Road and the first floor as well. And then for the student, the green part is the kind of the entrance space, and then the core is colored in light blue. And then the floor on the upper floor, they're kind of quite simple in terms of the layout. So the upper floor from second to 14th floor, they kind of replicate, they're the same, and mainly consist of 3 types of PBSA units. So on the right-hand side of the corner, the darker blue is the accessible studio, so 1 on each floor, and then there's 26 two rooms, i.e., so there are 2 private and ensuite bedroom sharing kitchen, living room, and dining space. So that comprises of 15.3% of the student bed space, and the rest of them they are regular studios. As I mentioned, because of the scheme would not be able to provide any on-site affordable housing. So this application will include a affordable housing payment in lieu, which is around 7.7 million, which is equivalent to 35% of capital rooms. It's well mentioning that this application was validated in February 2025, so that is prior to the adoption of the new bill and Section 106 SPD in July 2025, which has a higher tariff per habitable room, which is £130,000 per habitable room. For the old SPD, that is £100,000 per habitable room. So we consider that as using the old tariff, that would be equivalent of 45% of the habitable room under the old tariff. The payment in lieu will be triggered in 3 installments, so 25% will be on the 4 implementation. That's visual just to show how it looks roughly. That as well. And just to quickly, as a comparison of the extend scheme and this application, roughly the massing is is nearly identical, especially in terms of the height. The real difference is the use of the building, and there's a slight reduction in the commercial rate as well. So I guess members will be aware that policy P1 required affordable housing to be provided on site, and payment in lieu is only acceptable when in exceptional circumstances where on-site and off-site conventional affordable housing cannot be provided. And this image to try to show why, in this case, it's very challenging to provide on-site affordable housing, because introducing conventional affordable housing will require additional core for that particular residential use, which means we need extra lift, stair costs, entrances, especially in terms of fire safety, you will need 2 stair courses and also additional amenity spaces as well. So even with all of that as well, there will still be a concern about building heights and number of homes, which were raised by registered provider. That's the reason why they couldn't take on the initial scheme, the affordable housing unit in the extent scheme. And in terms of off-site affordable housing provision, the applicant has also undertaken an exercise to explore providing the affordable housing off-site. So they made offer on 5 separate sites within Old Kent Road site allocation 16, but none of the opportunities have materialized for the reason like they were either sold for existing commercial or church uses, or the landowners were just not interested. So the next slide would try to address the issue about whether student housing will build to a mixed and inclusive neighborhood. So this slide try to show, as member will be aware, that a couple of schemes within Old Kent Road that were either built, consented. So in total, there would be, including this application, there will be 3,718 student rooms within the Old Kent Road opportunity area. But also, this PBS SA scheme always come with conventional affordable housing, and that would be around 270 in total within this PBSA scheme, together with around 46.7 million payment in lieu across all the scheme within Old Kent Road opportunity area. See where the distribution are, and the application site is annotated by the yellow dots in this diagram. And looking slightly in the micro neighborhoods and stuff like the wider areas. So the sites that I mentioned earlier is within site allocation 16, which is outlined in orange in the image on the right. This diagram also shows the scheme that have been built. Purple under construction, in pink and light blue in for those schemes that have received resolution to grant, etc. So all these schemes, when we look at it within sub-area 4, which includes not only this application site, but also Tustin Estate, OKR 17 and OKR 18, we look at the student best space for living units and we convert it to the kind of equivalent of conventional home. So there would be in total around 3,000 conventional home equivalent within sub-area 4, and 1,241 would be affordable homes. So that would mean around 41% of it with the old sub-area 4 still be affordable home, even with these applications, unfortunately, without any on-site affordable housing. We look at further like micro scale, just OKR 16 and did the same exercise. There would be 606 affordable homes within OKR 16 site allocations, again outlined in orange in the image that you can see in front of you. 38% of that will be affordable It's worth noting that the lack of affordable housing in the proposal means the development is inherently less likely to contribute to a mixed and inclusive neighborhood than it might be otherwise. However, as I mentioned earlier, the applicant has explored options of delivery of affordable homes through on-site and off-site, but these options are just not feasible or deliverable in the foreseeable future, particularly given the size and the shape of the site. So on balance, it's considered that development it still meets the policy requirement because it meets the requirement in the policy that exceptional circumstances has been rated. Members probably will be aware that back in 2024, the committee reviewed a PBSA scheme nearby, and it was also only offer payment in lieu. But this scheme and that scheme, which is currently under appeal, officers feel that they're materially different. As you can see from the image in front of you, they're of the aerial photos, they are of the same scale. So you can get a sense of the size difference of the two sites. One is 0.34 hectare, and the other ones I mentioned is 0.057 hectares. It's relatively small, and the shape of the site is one that the committee refused, was quite rectangular, and this one is triangular. And the scale are also different, so the impacts on the mixed and inclusive neighborhood arguably would be different as well. For the appeal scheme, that would be 592 student best paid. For this one, it's 9. And it's also worth noting that since the planning committee decided to review the appeal scheme that's currently appealed, the National Planning Policy Framework has been revised, which introduced a presumption in favor of brownfield redevelopment. And as you can see from the slide, it's the direct quote from the NPPF, which saying substantial weight should be given to value of using suitable brownfield land within settlement for homes and other identified needs, which in this proposal is within brownfield side, and it has got identified need by the PBSA unit in itself, and also the offsite affordable housing payment in lieu to deliver affordable housing, and the indirect impact by releasing the family home that would have been otherwise been occupied by students if the scheme doesn't go forward. As you can see from the screen, proposal for development should be approved unless substantial harm would be caused. So member will be aware that the harm possibly is the impact on mixed and inclusive neighborhood. So on balance, opposite view is on balance, the scheme is acceptable given the impact that we have set out earlier. Just in terms of the architecture, so you can see to get a sense of predominantly a brick building and some brick arches on the ground and first floor elevations with references to the railway that I mentioned earlier to the east of the site. And following the officer's request, the southern section of the tower facade has also been further improved. As you can see, the use of some glazed sawtooth bricks, which add additional visual interest. The material shown indicatively at this stage are considered high quality and robust. The core typical agent, as you can see from the images, the regular studio will be either be 16 or 18 square meters in terms of GIA. The studio units, they are like 30.8 square meters. The bedroom will be furnished with a small double-sized bed, a desk, and a storage space as well. In terms of the internal communal facilities, the table showed roughly in terms of the internal communal facility per PBSA best space around 1.23, which is within the scheme that we have seen across London and within the borough, which varies from 0.77 to 1.7 square meter per PBSA space. taking into account the size of the site and shape, the mix, and the size of the student room. The overall design quality is also considered acceptable. In terms of the impacts on neighboring amenities, the major impact will be on the Tustin Estate Phase 1, which is currently under construction, as you see on the screen. Overall, because the massing, as I mentioned earlier, it's broadly the same as the extent scheme, the impact is considered acceptable. Overall, the scheme will deliver a number of benefits, including meeting the housing needs that I mentioned earlier, as well as delivering light industrial floor space, including a 10% of affordable workspace, which is beyond the minimum requirement because in the total number of commercial floor space provided, that means by policy requirement, there's no actual for affordable workspace, so the 22.5 square meter is beyond the minimum requirement, and there would be Section 106 contribution towards various improvements in terms of transport, local public ground, carbon offset, etc. In total, that would be around £370,000 in the financial contribution, and then there would also be a 1.3 million still payment as well. And during construction, there will be new job created that will be secured by Section 1 agreement. So on balance, as I mentioned, that planning permission be granted subject to condition referral to the GLA and entering this Section 1. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you for that. Questions from members of the committee. Councillor Tester.
Thank you. So it's page 18 of our member packet, the one where you're looking at the sorry, it's actually sorry, apparently it's actually not that page. I think it's here we go, page 22. That was it. So could you just clarify for me? So you were saying that the two-stair core thing is particularly problematic because you've got, if you were to have conventional affordable housing on there and student accommodation, you'd need two kind of completely separate non-permeable cores. So you'd need two staircases in each of them. So 4 total, is that correct?
Yeah, that's hard because I don't think that's a hard and fast rule for building regulation. But as I mentioned, registered provider, for management reasons, they would want their own separate core, which means for their bed, they will need their own two-stair core in addition to the two-stair core for the PBSA. So in total, 4 across the whole scheme. Yes, that's correct.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to ask about the payment in lieu, the affordable housing and it not being provided on site. In paragraph 131, we've got a kind of explanation of that on site. I'll read it. On site provision of affordable housing is generally preferred. Policy P16 Southwark Plan allows for payment in lieu of cash payment towards affordable housing where affordable housing cannot be provided on site. So I get to the first stage of my question. Is it officers' opinion that it is impossible to provide affordable housing on site within this development?
Yeah, that's correct. So the reason being, as mentioned earlier, the applicant has done a conventional mixed tenure scheme. That is the 2022 scheme. That 2023 scheme. That was maybe I can just show it. That was the scheme. Yeah. That was a 16 affordable units in it. Unfortunately, there's no registered provider willing to take this on. That means there's no affordable housing provider will be able to provide affordable housing from this scheme. And the council property team has also looked at it and whether the council can acquire the 16 affordable housing units. But the conclusion is the same as the provider, that for the management reason, that so from that perspective, so that's the third link of the criteria. Unlikely that concept for the housing can be provided either as a mixed residential scheme, as you can see this one, or within the PBSA itself that we are looking at. Both options unlikely to.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand those arguments. For me, this is a concern that we're not getting on site affordable housing, and there's reasons why in policy, payment in lieu is seen as a kind of second best, really. And I guess one of this is more of a comment, actually, than a question. Is one of the things I would like to see is more guarantees about the additional affordable housing that will be built via Southwark's building programme as a result of this payment. I don't want this to become cost shunting. This is what I'm concerned about, because I think that drives a coach and horses through our policy. I'm not expecting a response to that. That's just a comment.
Councillor Whittam.
Yeah, I've been looking at page 31 and back about quality of student accommodation, and the average per PBSA bed space of 1.23. Now, I remember from co-living schemes that we presented that most of those have got between 5 and 7 square meters. Communities even breakout spaces and workspaces and meeting gyms and cinema, all those sorts of things. The only things that aren't bigger is the laundry. So what does that 1.23 square meters represent as? Feel like amenities. What sort of amenities get the 1.3 square meters?
I'm sorry, Councillor, can just give me a few minutes. I just need to get to the applicant did provide information in terms of the I can tell for sure is that in terms of that mini space, as you can see from mostly on the first floor that are highlighted in green. So I think at the moment the applicant is proposing to have some sort of cafe, gym, etc. So that is kind of flexible internal immediate space, communal space. That will be further as we decide to progress. They are kind of like, as you mentioned, it could be like study room, etc. So it would be a space where students can socialize with their mates. Just on top of that, that is a kind of secondary. It's not directly answering your question, but the thing will also be external and space as well, which I probably didn't mention it earlier in the presentation. That would be a roof terrace of 69 square meter of space.
So the 1.23 square meters just the meeting room.
And some other internal amenity space. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Vampy.
I should probably know the answer to this question, so please don't think I'm not reading and reflecting on both the Southwark and London plan daily, because I am every day, 7 a.m.
So, but my
Sorry, Councillor Bambi, can I just check you know what 7 a.m. is?
sorry, 6 a.m. If I was convinced by the argument that, and I understand the arguments outlined about affordable housing, etc. If I was convinced by the argument that subject to change in market conditions, there would be demand for residential housing at this site, would that be grounds to refuse planning permission for this student accommodation?
I think perhaps if you go back to the I think Pam was making the point that one, market conditions might change, and hopefully the market for residential development generally will pick up. There are some things about this site that cannot be changed, and one of them is the size of the site and the configuration. You can see on the first floor there, that is the area in light blue, that's the core. It's already not a very efficient kind of design just because of the building. And if you imagine that you then need to replicate that light blue area, another core, another set of lifts for a conventional residential, but I mean, you're just not left with very much floor space on each floor. When the applicants were marketing the conventional residential scheme, quite a few of the housing associations and actually Southwark said we're not interested in principle because it doesn't have a second entrance and it doesn't have a second core for the affordable space. I think had the applicant been able to kind of address that, then they could have done so. But the fact is there just isn't room to put another core. You just end up with very little floor space that you can actually generate an income.
Yeah, I take the point, but the previous scheme was for residential housing, correct? And I was just asking if the committee was persuaded by the argument that a situation in the future could arise where a scheme like the previous scheme was a viable one. Would that be legitimate grounds to refuse planning application for student accommodation because what we would prefer is residential property? Would that be legitimate grounds?
I confirm that wouldn't be. So committee are asked to take a decision on the case before them rather than the scheme that they would like to see at some future point. So basically our recommendation is asking you to consider this scheme as student tested against policies about student.
I wanted to just turn to slide 32 of the presentation and paragraph 245 of the report, which is about the impact on the daylight and sunlight to the new block of the Tustin estate that's been, well, it's almost near completion and people are likely to be moving into it later this year. Now, obviously, that building, I don't even think had planning permission at the time of the 2020 permission. And obviously, there's some significant impacts identified in the report about the impact on daylight and sunlight. So just to talk that through a little bit more. So that's building G1 on Tustin estate. Paragraph 245 does set out the impact on quite a number there in terms of daylight and sunlight. Significant. Albeit I recognise that some of those are dual aspect properties, and we have the issue about balcony overhangs, things which sometimes creates an issue. Walk through that a little bit more.
So, as you mentioned earlier, so the scheme that was approved was so basically, when we look at this, the G2 reserve matter was granted recently for the Tustin estate. Outline permission was granted before that was in. So at the time, the scheme should have considered the development proposal on this site because it was granted before that. So the Tustin estate, the design of it should have accommodate the scheme that was approved before on this site. That is the 23 scheme. So I believe you're definitely right that there would be impact on the G1 block of the Tustin estate. As I mentioned, is because the scheme itself, the massing, this scheme that in front of us is the building envelope is not nearly identical to the extent scheme that was approved. So in terms of impact, would have been the same as in estate G1, and also the G1 itself, because there's some kind of design feature that would restrict daylight and sunlight as well. As you can see from the top images, there would be some external walkway, the image, that will kind of restrict the daylight by the walkway itself within G1. And also because the configuration of G1, they got projecting wings on both sides. So the central bit within G1, the daylight of it can be restricted by the wing within G1 itself. So because of all of that, if the impact is considered on balance and acceptable for the restriction and due to the design G1 itself and also the extent permission that was granted. So overall, the impact will be acceptable, and bear in mind it is within an area where tall building is expected as well. The impact will be mutual as well. The impact of Tustin that also have similar impact on the building that we're looking at. So overall, it's considered that the impact is on G1 is a.
And just to add on G1, the deck that Pan's described, deck access, dual aspect. So the central block, the kitchen's bedrooms face towards Wilson Road. And then the taller block on the north, the corner unit. So they're the larger bit on the
helpful. Any further questions for officers? Do we have any objectors in the meeting that wish to come and address the meeting? I don't believe we have. In that case, would the applicants like to step? Okay, apologies for the wait until this stage of the meeting. We will ask you to introduce yourselves, say who you are and where you're from, and then I'll give you 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Matt Driscoll. I'm planning manager at the applicant.
Josh Chad from Taylor Solutions. I'm Tom Draper from Stitch Architects.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for your time to hear me this evening. Tailored Living Solutions is a Southwark-based company that has been delivering high-quality places to live and work in the borough since 2012. Our small local team knows the area well, and we are proud of the strong partnership we have built with the council and our track record of schemes that contribute positively to the local area. Turning to this proposal, the form and height of the building are already established through the site's extant consent for a 50-story building. This application stays fully within that approved envelope. The design has been through review, incorporates design officer's amendments, and was judged acceptable. It also aligns with the borough's tall building strategy, will make a positive contribution to the townscape. At ground floor level, the scheme delivers active frontage with high quality commercial space, while the upper floors deliver purpose-built student accommodation. We understand that the key considerations of affordable housing. We have undertaken a thorough and transparent process to test every possible route. Firstly, we explored on-site provision of conventional affordable housing. As part of a targeted marketing campaign reaching over 10,000 contacts and all known registered providers, we received no interest. Registered providers consistently told us that the small number of homes, risks of a tall building, and the shared tenure core made the units unviable. The council's own property team confirmed this position. Adding a separate entrance and core to split tenures would impact the number of affordable homes and student homes within the proposal, making it unviable. Second, we explored off-site provision. Multiple offers were made from multiple separate sites within the Old Kent Road area, but unfortunately none proved deliverable. Having exhausted both routes, the only viable and policy compliant option is a financial payment in lieu. This meets the exceptional circumstances criteria of the Council's policy. While the proposed sum of nearly 7.7 million is equivalent to 35% affordable housing under the Council's new July SPD. Importantly, as a Phase 1 scheme, these funds would be available to the Council early, enabling investment in local affordable housing projects such as the Tustin Estate directly opposite. Without on-site affordable homes, we carefully considered the policy SP2 to ensure the scheme achieves integration between the neighbouring development. Alongside existing residential homes and new developments providing conventional private, affordable, student and co-living housing, our scheme contributes positively to a genuinely mixed and inclusive neighbourhood. But while this proposal does not deliver on-site affordable housing, it does follow the sequential policy test and importantly secures a substantial and certain financial contribution for the Council to use where it can have the greatest impact. For these reasons, we respectfully ask members to grant planning permission.
Thank you. Questions from members of the committee. I'm going to Councillor Whittam.
Yeah, you referred my question before.
Sure. Would you mind bringing up the image, with the plan? Yeah. So the diagrams on the right show the floor plans of the building. So the intention is there's over 200 square meters in total of internal amenity for the PBSA use. So that's on mainly distributed on the first floor. That would be used for study spaces, communal gyms, spaces such as that. There's an additional internal space on the rooftop, an internal kind of vision to be sort of a communal dining space, larger sort of small kitchenettes attached, and that directly opens up onto the proposed roof terrace, sort of the range of spaces.
Councillor Wilson.
That only equates to one thing, square meters, whereas a lot of the co-living spaces isn't 5 square meters. Being very
I think Pan covered this earlier in his report. When we prepared the scheme and when it was being designed, we looked at all the student PBSA schemes that had been approved in the borough, and they were on average, I think it was between 0.77 and 1.7 square meters per bed space. Co-living is slightly different. I don't know how that sort of relates to the PBSA, but certainly for the PBSA that we've seen and that we looked at, which was around 12 schemes last couple of years, we fell squarely within the average there.
We did also consult with Homes for Students just to make sure the right place, also the right type of space.
Councillor Tester.
Thank you for your presentation. Just so I can kind of get my head around this, did you consult with any RPs when you were looking at the original conventional housing project? It seems as though there were some kind of fatal design flaws, as it were, with that if you are providing such a small number of on-site affordable homes, but the kind of configuration of the site doesn't really allow for those two separate floors, which most RPs would be looking for. And just purely from like a management perspective, it's a lot more able to have your own separate core. So just to kind of understand that, because there's a real sort of skeptical part that thinks we kind of come forward with this original scheme, you've got the kind of planning consent, it's therefore a kind of material consideration for us now, when you actually come forward with something that is possibly, Bambo was alluding to, less desirable to conventional housing. And there is just a real sort of skeptical part of me that kind of thinks that there's a lot of schemes that we're sort of seeing that are doing this now. They're going from having a conventional housing scheme to then coming back with a student scheme, and it does sit quite uncomfortably with me, just because it seems as though it's an easy way to kind of get around our due processes as a council. So I would just be really interested to know if you did actually look into that scheme.
Yes. So to give some context, Pan explained in his presentation, but we had an affordable housing provider on board when we were coming forward. We submitted the application. So we got consent for the 2020 permission, submitted in 2018. It was a smaller scheme. We had to, at the very last minute, chop. So we came back in with HSPG on board, but they had certain requirements in terms of the core split floors. There were 3 floors, 2 floors of social rented and 1 floor shared ownership. We went through the entire application with them on board. We had a resolution to grant, I think, everyone November 2. Immediately after that, in December, the GLA suddenly said you can't go to stage 2 because you need staircases. So we managed to fit the 2 staircases in, but we had about a 9-month period between that and when we were getting consent. And then following that, we had all economic, trust economic, and HSPG pulled it. So at that point, we used CalMars to do all the searching, and they went to their 10,000 contact. But we went everybody on the approved registered provider list on Southwark's sheet. There was we went back to officers and said, we've been through all of these, and they came back to us and said, try more. So and 5 others that we tried. Then Colin was saying to us, well, we might have temporary accommodation, might be interested. We investigated with Southwark on that. There was no interest on that aspect. Tried absolutely everything for about 2 years. And then we thought, deliver this and the option. It's the preferred. Councillor Tesler.
Thank you. Actually, I really appreciate how transparent you're actually being about this, because I don't think applicants as you are, and that's really appreciated. Kind of given that, would you have at any point considered a kind of conventional housing scheme that had an in lieu provision, or is that just not viable for this site because it's so kind of strained and very high? That kind of they're being weighed up here.
We did, and it might be a question more for Colin and Tim, but potentially. We earlier this year we did seek to no, not earlier this year, last year, sought to amend our planning permission to do a payment, but it wasn't.
Okay, that's useful to understand. So if it had been conventional housing, you probably wouldn't have been able to afford an in-payment in lieu that was equivalent to 35%. Any further questions for officers coming out of the what we've heard from the applicants? Sorry, I ought to just double check. I will say this, although that I do not believe there are any supporters or ward councillors in the room that wish to speak on this. And just to be clear, for the record, there is nobody else in the room, so we can be fairly clear on that. But just for form, I will make that clear. Any further questions to officers? Any comments, observations you'd like to make at this stage? I'm going to go to Councillor Bamby.
Chair, you said that the mayor has a target of 10,000 student rooms, is it? It would be good to know if it was like in Southwark, we could potentially be providing all 10,000 rooms. So
10,000 is Southwark's target.
Okay.
So that's the overall figure that the mayor wants. It's something like 3,000 a year, isn't it? But the sort of from the global total that comes to, I can't remember over what time frame it is now, but they're seeking a total of 10,000 student places being built in Southwark.
Okay. So we're not in surplus.
The 2036. Thank you.
I was worried we might be in surplus, but perhaps not then.
Well, what I would have to say, I know it was covered in the presentation, is feel as if we talked earlier about the Elephant and Castle student place as well. The Old Kent Road is the greater level of student accommodation. That 10,000 target, we're well over a third of that is in Old Kent already into what's permission, even before this. So it does feel very much as if it's geographically in a few areas. So yeah, I mean, I have to say, it's one of those ones where, if I'm being honest, I'm not enthusiastic about this. I think, more student accommodation where I don't think we need it. We're not getting affordable housing provided on site. I am slightly concerned as well about that impact on building G1 as third. On the other hand, I think, I'm not sure any of those, particularly given the previous application that's been at that latter point, is strong enough to sustain refusal of the scheme. And I certainly recognise that 7 points pounds towards council home building programme is not that either. Which the other thing I do quite like to say, I think actually for a building of its size and location, it's actually quite well designed. I do quite like the design of it, so I think that's been done well. And I certainly recognise that the very nature of the site makes it very difficult. Even probably before the things about needing a second stair core came along, make it quite difficult to provide that on-site provision. It's 16 homes, a very large number, and it is at about a sixth of the site of the one where we have taken a stand in terms of the provision. And that sequential test of what you need to do before we get having an in lieu payment, it's clear that has been gone through. And I think the applicant's explanation of what's happened, how it got there, it's very clear. It's been genuine. It's been Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I am reluctant about this one, and I don't, in principle, like it when we don't see the homes getting built in the actual development. That does give me, significant pause. But then you got to think it through and say, well, there's two things. Is there something about the site that makes it very, very difficult in order to provide that? And even notwithstanding those difficulties, has the developer and the councillor gone above and beyond to try and make that work and try and deliver those on. And from what I've heard tonight, just about, I think those concerns have been answered. That it is a strange shaped building, and I'm not an architect, but the explanation I've heard about the core and and I do think the council test the transparency of the developer around the process that they've been through with the landlords, the social landlords, to try and get interest in the original application. Clearly, that has been extensive, and I take it on trust from our officers, because I do trust our officers. But you set a higher bar for developers coming applications because there's so many other people. But actually, from what I've heard, I am reassured that they have gone through that. So, slightly reluctantly, I would be minded to. But that, I don't like matter of principle those applications without me seeing that there's going to be housing. But probably on this occasion, I think you would. You're right, Richard, as well. The bar for using.
Councillor Seaton.
First of all, Chair, I'll ditto all what Councillor Edwards has described. I think I can't disagree with you at all. I suppose a few quick questions. Of course, for me, this is a repeat of earlier experiences, you see. Maybe 2 points. I do want to understand the need for student accommodation. You said it's 3,000 a year to 2036, that's the figure? Or did 3,000? That's a lot. Oh, excellent. Therefore, we must have far exceeded that sum by now. And I'd be interested to see an analysis of the number of student accommodations over the past, let's say, from the beginning of my time, let's say, till today. I'd be interested to see that figure. So, notwithstanding my comments on the previous application, that's the first point. The second point, I would congratulate the applicant for what is a very awkward site. I recall visiting that site on a few occasions and wondering how on earth you can have people living there anyway, forgive me. So therefore, it was quite clear that it was always going to be a challenge to secure an RP. So that was pretty clear. And the only alternative was going to be ourselves as council. That didn't work. Therefore, notwithstanding Councillor Edwards' comments, I don't think there's much choice really but to offer a payment in lieu. And the very, very thorough and transparent process has been outlined repeatedly here. Thank you and thank you. I've got no hesitation in therefore giving support to this application.
Thank you. Are we moving to, I think, setting out the recommendation and voting on it, I think. Given all of those comments, and thank you everybody for all of those, I would like to ask that we agree the recommendation as set out in the report. So that is, first of all, that full planning permission be granted for the application, subject to conditions, referral to the Mayor of London and the applicant entering into a satisfactory legal agreement, and the planning committee making a decision as regard to potential qualities impact which are outlined in this report, and an event of the requirements of paragraph 1 not having been met by the 10th of March 2026, the Director of Planning and Growth be authorised to refuse planning permission for the application if appropriate for the reasons set out in paragraph 488 of the report. Does any member wish to say? Seaton, just to take members in turn. Councillor Whittam.
For Chair.
I'm going to take Councillor Seaton.
For Chair.
Councillor Banby.
For.
Councillor Tester.
For Chair.
Councillor Edwards.
Yeah.
And yes, with some reluctance as chair, I will also vote for that. The motion is carried and the application is granted.
Thank you, everybody. I'm losing my voice, but that does bring us to the end of the meeting. So thank you, everybody, and safe travels home. Take care.